Hey everybody, my name is Paul Abernathy and welcome back to Electrical Code Academy, where we talk about the National Electrical Code and we try to teach you the important aspects of the NEC that you can really use in a day in and day out basis. Now, let me talk to you about something. If you're trying to learn the National Electrical Code and you find it hard, we make it easy. Our Fast Tracks program is the most comprehensive program you're going to get on learning the National Electrical Code, but if you're preparing for an electrical exam, we teach you what you need to know to be successful in an exam. But maybe you need more than that. Maybe you want to deep dive now. Now that you've kind of gotten your license, maybe you've used our program, our Fast Tracks Black or our Plus, which is available right there at fasttracksystem.com to get your license, or maybe to learn the NEC at a very high level. But now maybe you want to deep dive. You're a residential guy and you want to create this learning curve reduction. Means you want to learn everything you can learn room by room by room by room. We've got programs for you. We got the Fast Tracks Red, which is our residential wiring program. We deep dive into all the residential code when it comes to electrical. We have the Fast Tracks Green, which is commercial wiring, all of those things with motors and transformers. We have the industrial course, which is the Fast Tracks Blue. If you're into industrial wiring and all that type of stuff. We've got grounding and bonding courses. Everybody needs to take a grounding and bonding course, a good grounding. In fact, your employer should pay for that because the majority of the things that people do wrong are associated with grounding and bonding. Now, who am I to tell you all this? Well, again, my name is Paul Abernathy. I'm the creator of the Fast Track system. I have been doing this for over 30-some years. If you go to the front of this code book, you'll see my name in Code Panel 5 and Code Panel 17. So I'm not a fly-by-night YouTuber. I've been doing this for many years. And long before people knew what podcasts and video streaming was, I was doing it and I was loading it upline on AOL. You remember AOL? And I would upload it in a repository and I was sharing with people around the country. And then as we grew, we were able to create websites and expand it. So we were probably one of the first ever doing it online. And so I have taught over 50,000 students, both in classroom, online, and again, probably way more than that if you think about all the people that are taking my courses. And I love living vicariously through all of my students. If you want to really start to learn the NEC, whether you're already licensed or you're trying to get your license, go watch some of the demos on our website, fasttracksystem.com. You're going to be amazed. And if you want some of our great videos, go check out fasttrackstube.com or fasttrackstv.com if you want. And there you're going to get a lot of videos, not just by me, but by other educators in the industry that we have ferreted out and made sure that they are very valid and they're educational and they're not just a sales piece. They're really trying to teach you something in the National Electrical Code. Then you might want to subscribe to our Fast Tracks Tube. Now, if you want a discount code, I'll give you one. Just go and check out at fasttrackstube.com. That's for our annual membership to our video platform. Use the checkout code 25OFF, and that's OFF, all caps, 25OFF, and you'll get $25 off your annual subscription. That's a way to support us, and that's the way we recommend, and you'll get access to a lot of video series that we have out there, our grounding and bonding series. I also did a secondary conductor and branch circuit conductor webinar. It's available there as well. Plus our swimming pool, spas, and hot tub series is all there as well. So check that out. It's all included in the Fast Tracks Tube. Okay, so there's many ways that you can learn from us. Okay, enough of the sales pitch, right? Let's go on and get into it. So this is a continuation video. We're going to be talking now about receptacle placements. We have another video on that, so make sure you check that out for kitchens. But now we're going to be talking about peninsular and island receptacle placement. Now, this is very specific to the 2020 edition of the National Electrical Code because in 2023, this all changes. So again, if you're studying for the 2020, then this is the right place for you to be. So let's go on and get into this. All right, so if you're in our Fast Tracks program, you'll recognize this. We're in Unit 7. This is 1E, and it's peninsular and island receptacle placement. Now, in kitchens, pantries, breakfast rooms, dining rooms, and similar areas of dwelling units, receptacle outlets for countertops and work surfaces that are 12 inches wide or 12 inches or wider okay, shall be installed in accordance with 210.52C1 through C3. Means you have to have a receptacle. So if you're in the kitchen or breakfast room or dining room and you have a countertop surface, okay, if it's at least 12 inches or wider, then it has to have a receptacle. Of course, the small appliance branch circuits, minimum of 2, are going to be what supply these receptacles in this kitchen, pantry, breakfast room, dining room, or similar area. Like a similar area would be like a nook inside of a kitchen area. Okay, so that's what you're going to have. So we're going to be talking about the receptacle placement now. And shall not be considered as receptacle outlets required by 210.52A2. What does that mean? That means that these receptacles are to serve the counter. They're not to serve the rest of the wall space that's in those rooms. Okay, like you're in your kitchen, you have normal wall space, and then you have the space that your counter's connected to. Well, that wall space, that also requires receptacles, and you would space those in accordance with the 6-foot, 12-foot rule. And we covered that in another video. So again, go watch that video if you want to know what 210.52A is about when we say 6-foot, 12-foot rule. But remember, receptacles for the countertop are different than the receptacle requirements for the wall around the room. Okay? Now, for islands and peninsular countertops and work surfaces, receptacle outlets shall be installed in accordance with 210.52C2A and C2B. Okay, so those are the ones that you need to key in on right here, right there, when it comes to islands and peninsulas. Now, as I always say, when you see code references, more importantly, when you see the things that are in the chevrons, you want to make sure that you go to your code book and you read it every time. Anytime you see a chevron in our course or in my videos, go ahead and pause the video. Go read it. And then come back and things will start to make more sense to you. And that's why we do it. That's why we have the chevrons. All right, so let's go down and look here. At least one receptacle shall be provided. Okay, so we're talking, so this is whether it's an island or a peninsula. Okay, this is what we're talking about. We have to have, what is the rules to determine how many receptacles we need? All right, so let's start looking at the math here. You have to have at least one receptacle shall be installed for the first 9 square feet. The first 9 square feet or fraction thereof. And what's a fraction thereof of 9 square feet? 8 square feet, 7 square feet, 6 square feet, 5 square feet, 4 square feet. All of those are fraction thereofs of the first 9 square feet. Okay, so you have to have at least one. Right? Then it goes on to say, a receptacle outlet shall be provided for every additional 18 square feet or fraction thereof of the countertop or work surface. So that's covered in 210.52C2A. Okay. So again, we're going to look at all that and we'll kind of break it down. I'll show you an illustration and this will start to make sense. Trust me, it will make sense. And we'll do the math. Now, when it comes to a peninsula, so that rule still applies, whether it's an island or a peninsula. But when the peninsula is particularly involved, it says at least one receptacle outlet shall be located within 2 feet of the outside edge of the peninsular countertop or work surface. Additional required receptacles outlets shall be permitted to be located as determined by the installer, designer, or the building owner. That's so important. So the first 9 square feet, the first one has to be within 2 feet of the outside edge of the peninsula. Now, if it's bigger and it has the next 18 square feet, then you can put that anywhere you want as the installer, the owner, wherever they want. But I have to have at least one within 18 inches, within 2 feet of the outside edge of that peninsula countertop surface, okay? We're going to see what that is all about. We'll look at an illustration, okay? So that's the rule. So islands are simple. Peninsula, the only thing that takes that to the next level is the fact that you have to have it within what? Within 2 feet of the outside edge of the peninsula countertop. All right, so let's look at it. Here we go. A A is referring down here, so we'll look at A. So here's our layout. Here's A. And this right here, as you see this sticks out right here, this is your peninsula. Okay? And the easiest way to remember a peninsula is that it is only open on three sides. One side is a abutting wall. Okay? Whereas the island is exactly how it sounds. It's island. It sits out in the middle, and none of the walls are in contact. None of the sides of the countertop are in contact with any wall. All right? So let's see here. We're talking about A right here, pointing right here. So here's what it says. It says a peninsular countertop shall be measured from the connected perpendicular wall. Okay, so that's how we want to measure it. So let's see here. So here's the wall, and it's perpendicular, okay, running in opposite direction. It's perpendicular of the peninsula. So this way, the peninsula is running this way. Okay, you see my mouse? It's running this way, but the wall is running this way, perpendicular. So the measurement is from that wall out. That's how you do the measurement, okay? And then, of course, that's the way you measure out, right? And then, of course, you've got the depth of the countertop you have to take into consideration when you're determining what? The square footage. All right, so let's look at this. So that's where the measurement starts. B. And what is B? All right, B is right here, talking about the peninsula. Starting the calculation. Calculate the square footage area of the peninsula countertop. All right, so let's look at it this way. Let's look here. So this measurement here says it's 120 inches. So 120 inches. All right, so 120 inches, all right, is 10 feet. So that's where we got the 10 foot right here. All right, I'm going to blow this up so you can see it. So that's the 10 foot. And the width of it was what? Right here, this measurement, 48 inches. So it comes out 10 feet, and the width of it is 48 inches. So this far, 10 feet, depth 48, okay? So we're going to do the math. It is going to be what? 120 divided by 12 is 10 foot, okay? So 48 inches is 48 divided by 12 is 4 foot. So it's 10 times 4, and that is 40 square feet. So how's that going to work? So if the square footage for this peninsula right here equates to 40 square feet. Remember, first 9 square feet requires 1, and that has to be located where? Within 2 feet of the end, okay, and that's why that's there. And then the other one can be placed anywhere you want, okay? So let's look at this. So 40 square feet is what we calculated. The minimum required receptacles, all right? 1 receptacle is required for the first 9 square feet, so we take the 40, and we take 9 from it, that's going to be the 1, and that leaves me 31. All right, so we got the 1, so now the remainder is 31. And remember, it said every additional 18 square feet and fraction thereof. Okay, so then the 31, you divide it by 18. So in that case, we'll take the 31, and we're going to divide that by 18, and that is 1.72. Well, you can't have a 0.72, so that's going to be 2, all right? So the total number of receptacle, or I shouldn't say receptacles, the total number of outlets, that's important, outlets, receptacles go in the outlet. The outlet, this is an outlet rule. The total number of outlets that we're required to have is what? Overall, we're going to have 3, all right? Okay, now, with that scenario right here, the first one is right here. It's within 2 feet, and then the other ones can be wherever you want them to be. Now, incidentally, these receptacles that you see on this wall, they might be here because of the normal wall spacing requirement. Well, they can serve double duty. If they're here and they're in the footprint of this peninsula, okay, then guess what? They can serve also as the other receptacles for this peninsula. And they are serving double duty. They're serving the wall spacing And they're also serving, they're in the footprint of the peninsula, so they're also the other two that are serving the peninsula, and you've got more than enough receptacles for this peninsula. Make sense? So that's how you apply that. So let's keep on getting it here. And so next we'll go and do, let's do the island now. Makes sense? All right, let's do the island. So this island is 48 inches by 30 inches. Okay, so we need to find out what we're dealing in feet. So 48 divided by 12, okay, is 4. And then since this is 30 inches, 38 divided by 12, I should do this so you can see it. 38 divided by 12 is 2.5. Excuse me, 30 divided by 12. So 30 divided by 12 is 2.5 feet, square feet, right? So what do? You take the 4 square feet and you multiply that by 2.5 square feet is what? Let me do it. 4 times 2.5 equals 10. Okay, you got your calculator. Work it out. Just because it's on the screen, don't take that for granted. Work it out. So now that we know that it's 10 square feet, we know that the first 9 square feet requires at least 1. And then the next 18 or fraction thereof. Well, if I take the 10 minus the 9, that leaves me with a remainder of 1 square foot. But that is a fraction of the next 18. So that means we need how many receptacle outlets? 2. Okay. So the additional receptacle outlet is required for the remaining 1 square foot. So you need 2 overall. Now, on this island, since it's flat across the entire surface, you are permitted to either put it in the island. You can pop it up. Again, you remember, it could pop up above it, okay? But it also can be below the countertop as long as, again, it's not more than 12 inches below, and it's not under an inner overhang that is more than 6 inches from the base. If it isn't, then we can put it down on the side, okay? And that's what it tells us right here, okay? The location of the 2 required island countertop receptacle outlets has been determined by the building owner. Put them anywhere they want on this island. There is no rule about being within 24 inches of this in it. It's wherever they want to put them in here. Again, sometimes these are really fancy islands, so you have to be very careful where the placement's going to be, that type of thing, right? But one of the things that we're going to take a look at real quick, and I'll finish this part on the G right here, and then we'll kind of go look at the code. G being, let's see here, G is right here. Notice that this one's for the wall, all right? Check this out. Another reminder, this receptacle has not been installed to serve the countertop surface. It is installed to meet the wall spacing requirements in 210.52a. It has nothing to do with the countertop. But since that receptacle is within 6 feet of the top inside edge of the bowl of the sink, guess what? It may be the living room, but it's required to be GFCI protected. And remember, the measurement is from the top inside edge straight as if it was a cord plugging in. Okay, so across the countertop and then at an angle straight down to the receptacle. If that is within 6 feet, then this receptacle would have to be GFCI protected, even though it's not serving the countertop. It's serving the wall space. So important to remember those things, folks. Really is important. Okay. All right. So let's go into the code real quick, and so we can kind of look at this for the peninsula and kind of get a feel on what it kind of looks like, and to quantify why you keep hearing me talk about receptacle outlet or the outlet reference. So let's go to the code. All right, so here we are in the code. I'm going to go to 210.52c. So, I'm going the wrong way. 210.52 right here. Here's 52. And I'm going to go down to C. Here you go. We're at C, and then I'm going to get down when we're talking about right here. Islands and peninsula countertops. Notice this is all grayed out. So this is where you get all your language. The first one, again, this applies to both islands and peninsulas. And then this one down here is specific to peninsulas, okay? And gives you all that information. Now, the receptacle placements, this is right here. This is called receptacle outlet location. Again, you saw it before. It can be on or above the countertop, okay, but not more than 20 inches. Right here, it says in the countertop or work surface, receptacle outlet assembly listed for use in the countertop. That's those pop-up style. It can pop up out of the countertop. They take up, in an island, they would take up drawer space, so typically not what we would use, but you could. And then, of course, the third one right here is the one that allows it to be below the surface. And that's what you're going to have on an island. You're going to have to go below the surface, right? Okay, so that's what it talks about here. Ironically enough, that's where that comes from. And so when you go back to the code, oh, wait a minute. I wanted to point out, I've got to point something out. I'm sorry. Notice right here, it says receptacle outlet. Okay, here, notice it says receptacle outlet. Why is that significant? Because the course talks about receptacles because that's what you're going to put in there. That's common sense. But I want to teach you something today. The receptacle outlet is the box, not the device. The box. Okay? Important. A 2-gang box is 2 receptacle outlets because you could put 2 devices in it. Important distinction. This rule is talking about the receptacle outlet. The receptacle is a device. The outlet is the box to which the receptacle, the device, will be installed. So when you see us talk about receptacles, it's because we know what you're actually going to put in there. So it's trying to simplify it for you, but I like to do that. And this is what I do when I do my one-on-ones with you, or when you come to my Wednesday night sessions. I show all these little nuances, right? Why is that? Why would I say that? Because basically, if I had this peninsula right here, let's come back real quick. And this is why I do this. If I had this peninsula right here, could I put a simplex receptacle, a single receptacle in there and still be compliant? Absolutely. Because it's all about the receptacle outlet box, not the device that I'm putting into it. Duplex, fine. Simplex, fine. Okay? Probably going to always put a duplex in there, but kind of, you get why I make that distinction. So in our course, we try to make it simple. It's, you know, a receptacle is going to go in there. But this is the kind of things that I talk about on my Wednesday nights because I like to get deep and I like to help you learn things that other people maybe just don't know. And that's why you get into a program like ours, structured program. Now let's talk about that mounting because again, I want to make sure that I hammer this home. Receptacle mounting below the countertop. Why am I hammering this home? Because in the 2023 code, this is not going to work. This is purely 2020, so pay attention. The receptacles installed more than 20 inches above the countertop or work surface, such as an overhead cabinet, are permitted, but they're not going to meet the requirements for the countertop receptacles. We've said that over and over and over again. So if I put a receptacle in a cabinet that's above a countertop, I can do that, but it's not going to meet my spacing requirement. My spacing requirement, those receptacles have to be within 20 inches, right? Okay. Let's talk about this one right here. So here you go. Here's a little island for you. Receptacles. Receptacles installed face up in work surfaces or countertops are not allowed unless the receptacle outlet assembly is listed for countertop or work surface applications. Okay, so it's got to be specifically listed for that application. Other than that, you are not going to have a receptacle in a face up position on a countertop, flat out. Okay. And where does that give you that? It tells you this in 210.52C32 as well as in 406.5E. Okay, it gives you that direction about that. So let's go on and look at it real quick. 210.52 C32. So let's just go there. Because I'm like you, I love going into the code and learning. So let's go into the code, 210.52, and we're going to go to C32 right here. Okay, so in a countertop, receptacle outlet assembly is listed for use in the countertops. shall be installed in counter. Okay. Now, we can have them in there. They're permitted, but these are assemblies that pop up. It's not necessarily face-up application. All right. And then what is 4006.5e? Let's go look at that. Let's see here. Well, we're going down into 406. I'm going to keep scrolling. There we go. 406.5e. Let's go look at this. Went too far. Right here. Receptacles in countertops. What does it say? Receptacle assemblies for installation in countertop surfaces shall be listed for countertop applications. Remember what I said earlier is that I can't use those pop-ups that have a cord and plug on it. That's more like a relocatable power tap. They have to be hardwired, and they're going to be listed for this. Okay. Now, it says where the receptacle assemblies for countertop applications are required to provide ground fault circuit interrupter protection for personnel in accordance with 210.8, such assemblies shall be permitted to be listed as GFCI receptacle assemblies for countertop applications. Okay? So, can I have them in it? Absolutely. But what about that face-up application? Okay? I can have them in it, but check this right here. Position of receptacle face, right? So again, it talks about all this type of stuff. And, so let's see here. Now that's face up. That's something else. We don't want to talk about that. That's another episode. I was going to go there, but we don't want to go there. Just keep it. So if you're going to do, there is no, you do not install them face up unless, of course, they happen to be listed for that. And I don't know of any that are listed for face up. Okay. Now I know some that pop up. I know some that come up like that. But again, none that are actually going to be face up like that. Now we have floor receptacle ones that are face up. That's perfectly fine. Also know that under a counter, you can't have a receptacle face up under a counter. Inside a counter where you would have the plumbing under the sink, you can't have it face up either in the 2020 code. All right, where was I at here? Let's go back to the code real quick. All over the place. All right, B right here. So this is a receptacle. This is flat across the top. So the code allows me to go below the surface. All right, this says GFCI protection is required for all receptacles installed to serve the kitchen countertop surface. So yeah, even though it's an island, if it's installed and it's to serve the countertop, even if it's below the countertop, which the code allows us to do, still got to be GFCI. Makes sense, right? All right, what about C right here? Although receptacles located more than 12 inches below the countertop or work surface are permitted, so yeah, I could have one down lower, but they're not going to meet the requirement to serve the countertop because they can't be more than 12 inches and they can't be under an overhang that is what? More than 6 inches. Okay? So extends more than 6 inches and I couldn't put the receptacle under here. At least the one to serve the countertop, I couldn't. Could I put one down here? Maybe this is dividing the living room from the kitchen. Well, then you got to be really careful because if this receptacle here is to serve this island, an inspector could consider this a room divider and it could require a receptacle on this side to serve the living room. And if that's the case, it can't be on that small appliance branch circuit. So it would have another receptacle down here if that inspector considered that to be a wall space. Now, when would an inspector maybe consider this to be a wall space? So let me give you some little inside help here. If your island is made of cabinets and the countertop just sits on a cabinet, then it is not wall space. Okay? If it actually is a wall that's built and they kind of frame up a 2x4 wall and then they push cabinets against it, then this is wall space. And it could be subject to normal 210.52a receptacles. And of course, you'll be putting in a receptacle to serve the countertop. Okay, so you might have two here. But remember, this receptacle to serve the countertop cannot serve the wall space. Okay, so the construction of the island can make a big difference. Okay, so if it's just cabinets there with the top on it, it is not a wall, and I would not consider it wall space. But if it's a framed up wall and you're pushing cabinets to it and you're putting a counter on it with an overhang, and so basically if you go into construction and you notice they frame it up, my house was like that. It was framed up. Then that's a wall. And if that wall is facing the living room, that's wall space. If it's even in the kitchen, if it's 2 feet or more, it's wall space. Okay? And if it's in the kitchen, then it could be on the small appliance brand circuit. See how the code, you got to know these things. And we cover it in our course. So if that sounded confusing to you or I didn't explain it to the point where you're like, I don't get it, we cover that in our course. We can answer those questions on Wednesday nights. That's why you want to check out my website and get in our program. Now, they could have put it here on the side. If this overhang was more than 6 inches, then you just stick it over here on the side. But every part of this receptacle can't be more than 12 inches below the countertop surface. Okay? So here you go. Now again, this receptacle, we'll talk about D right here. Here's the overhang. Receptacles mounted in the cabinet are permitted under the overhang of a countertop or work surface, but are not counted as required countertop receptacle where the countertop or work surface extends more than 6 inches beyond its support base. Okay, so this is the support base and this is the edge of the countertop. If this measurement right here is more than 6 inches, then I could not put a receptacle under here to serve the countertop. But that does not mean that I could not have a wall space receptacle. That would be okay as well if that was a wall. Okay. Okay. Just kind of wanted to throw all those things out there. Now here you go. The peninsular counter side without doors or drawers might be considered wall space by the authority having jurisdiction. If so, and if longer than 6 feet, a receptacle is required. But I'm going to be honest with you. If they consider it wall space and it's at least 2 feet, they're going to make you put a receptacle. So again, work with your AHJ, and I'm just giving you some insight. This right here, I would argue, is not a wall space if it's simply sitting on 2 cabinets. If it's a framed up wall, chances are they're going to argue that that is wall space, folks. So just little things that you learn. Okay, that's it, folks. So I've kind of covered the spacing. It's taken us multiple videos, but we've covered all of the spacing requirements for bedrooms, living rooms. That's a different video. We covered the kitchen receptacle layouts. That's another video. And in this one, we covered peninsula and island layouts and how to calculate them out. Covered quite a bit. Hopefully you got something out of that. Remember, if you really want to learn the National Electrical Code, do me a favor. At least go check out the website. We've got a lot of blogs. I've got page after page of blogs with really good content for calculations. They're all free. At least do me a favor, check them out, right? We have some free courses on there that you can check out. But if you really want to get into a program to learn the National Electrical Code, maybe it's pre-licensing, you're trying to pass an exam, go to our website and look at our Fast Tracks Black or our Fast Tracks Plus. Now, what's the Plus? It's the same as the Black program. You'll get all of the good information. You'll get to come to Wednesday nights. But the Plus means you get access to special videos over on fasttrackstube.com. Okay, that's an annual subscription. But if you become a member of the Plus, you get access to it for an entire year as part of your package. Okay. Now, if you're already licensed and you're like, well, look, guy, I'm already a journeyman or I'm a master and I do nothing but residential. Hey, why don't you deep dive and become that superstar when it comes to residential? Well, how do you do that? You get in our Fast Tracks Red program. It deep dives into every room within a dwelling, services, grounding, all the things that you need to know with residential wiring. That program covers it. What about commercial buildings? We cover that in the green program. Maybe you're in the industrial sector. We cover that in the blue program. Maybe you want to learn about grounding and bonding. We've got a purple program. Grounding and bonding is one of the best courses you're ever going to have. You really will learn it. And of course, you still get access to Wednesday nights if you want to come and ask any question that may confuse you. I'm here for you, folks. So hopefully you get something out of it. Go check out Fast Tracks Tube. Check out fasttracksystem.com. Watch the demos on some of our courses. And if you have any questions, all you got to do is go to the Contact Us button on the website, and you can send us any question, and we'll be more than happy to answer that for you. All right, folks. God bless. Until next time, stay safe. We'll catch you in the next video.
Morning coffee, vanilla latte served to go. I drink it slow. Morning coffee, vanilla latte served to go. I drink it slow.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Electrical Code Academy. My name is Paul Abernathy. I'm your instructor. And today we're going to talk about service conductors in this episode. Talk a little bit about them, see some illustrations, kind of give you a little better understanding. All of this comes from our Fast Track system. So if you're studying for an electrical exam or you just want to become better at the National Electrical Code, I can promise you something. I've been doing this for over 30 some years. All you got to do is go to the front of the code book and you will see my name under Code Panel 5 and Code Panel 17. So I'm not new at this game. But what I do that many educators don't is I try to make it easier for you to understand the National Electrical Code because it can be a daunting topic to talk about the National Electrical Code. So I try to break it down and make it a little easier for you. If you want to get in a good structured program to really learn the code, you'll be tested on your skills. It's not easy, but you will learn a lot from it. It's right here. All you got to do is go to fasttracksystem.com. We have demonstration videos on all of our courses. And you can go and learn more about it. If you want to get into exam prep, then that's the Fast Tracks Black or even the Plus. What's the Plus? Well, the Plus gives you also a year access to fasttrackstube.com. And that's where videos like this will be held exclusively for you to learn from. So that's just a discounted access to our Fast Tracks Tube. If you want to learn residential, post-licensing, we have our residential courses, commercial courses, grounding and bonding courses. Probably one of the most important courses you should take is grounding and bonding. We have all of those, as well as some very advanced courses like Magenta. That is a seriously advanced course. All those things are available over on fasttracksystem.com. Okay, enough of the commercial. Let's get into today's episode. We're going to be talking about service conductors. I'm going to try to give you some good information on service conductors. Obviously, we're not going to cover everything. But that's kind of a snapshot of what our course provides. And hopefully you'll jump into the course, but hopefully you enjoy this video. All right, so let's go on and get into it. All right, on this episode, again, obviously we're going to talk about service conductors. And for those that are following along that happen to be in our Fast Tracks program, it's 10-2H, and that's where we're going to be, right? All right, so let's kind of look at the material here. And as always, we have some great illustrations and we have good call-outs. Because we really want to be able to point to the things that we're talking about. So service conductors, let's talk about A. So A right here, okay, is right here. We're talking right here. And we're going to look at A. So if service conductors are supplying power to more than one unit in a multifamily dwelling, okay, so in this case, we're talking service conductors, and we're going to try to stick on the topic today like multifamily. Because the reason I like to do this is because when we're talking about things like one family dwellings, most people are pretty aware of those nuances, right? You have a service drop, comes down to the point of attachment, right? And you have that service point where the utility leaves off and the National Electrical Safety Code should say for the utility, and the NEC begins, right, on the load side of that service point. So we're pretty much familiar with that. You have service entrance conductors that come down into the meter and then go into the emergency disconnect or your service disconnect. Could be both. That's 230.85. We're familiar with that. So to illustrate a little more higher level topic for service conductors, I'm going to talk about it from a multi-family dwelling aspect to kind of ramp it up a little bit, because I think other than the component stuff, which we will get into, like terminating in a service and the grounding electrode system, we will get into that in these series. But I think we want to keep it where it gets complicated for people, especially when we're talking service conductors, because the other stuff is pretty simple. Here's where it can get complicated for people. So that's why we were going to kind of jump into this topic. But it's still going to be germane, so don't wander. It's all good. So A here says, if the service entrance conductors are supplying power to more than one unit in a multifamily building, using 310.12 and table 310.12 is not permitted. Okay, all right, so if the service conductors are coming down, these conductors here are coming down, this like the service drop or whatever it might be are coming down, then if it's supplying power to one building and everything was being supplied by that one set of service entry conductors, then guess what? If that was the case, then I would be able to use 310.12 and table 310.12. Now, if you're not familiar with table 310.12, that is the 83% rule that you hear so many people talk about. And I encourage you to pause and go watch that, because that's going to be done in a separate video where I explain that and understanding the nuances of 310.12. But in this video, I just want you to know that you can't use that. And so the reason we get that out of the way up front is because these service conductors aren't supplying the entire load of the building, right? So if you look at this illustration, these conductors that are in here are supplying only these loads. It's not supplying the whole building. So it doesn't have the luxury of using the 83% rule, okay? So I know that's some people that's going to be confusing. Well, then, Paul, then go ahead and explain the 83% rule in 310.12. I'm not going to do that because we're going to save that for a different video. I just want you to know that it's not going to apply here. Why? Because these service conductors right here, coming from the service drop connected, these service conductors are not seeing the entire load of the entire building. They're only seeing the load associated with these 6 units. Right? So therefore, 310.12 can't be applicable here. Right? Also, since this is supplying 6, it's also not supplying a one-family dwelling or an individual dwelling unit. So that's also something that 310.12 tells you, that unless you're doing that, then you can't use the 83% rule. So what does that mean? Well, that means you have to size the conductors using the normal ampacity tables in 310.16. Okay? You don't get to use the 83% rule. You just size them like you normally would, use the ampacity values from the normal ampacity table 310.16. Hopefully I made that clear for you. All right, now it says is not permitted. It says now, in accordance with 310.12a, selecting conductors from table 310.12 shall be permitted where the service conductors supply the entire loads associated with an individual dwelling unit in a 2-family or multifamily, or supplies the entire load for a 1-family dwelling. Okay, but we're not talking that today because that's obvious. Here we're trying to make it a little more complicated. All right, so in this case, it does not. So you can't apply 310.12. So the reason we do this is get that out of the way. You cannot use the 83% rule on a setup like this where you have potentially multiple services like this. And again, each one of these obviously has a breaker on it. Okay. And this is one service to a building, one drop. Okay. So you can't use 310.12, but you're going to do a load calculation and you're going to size those conductors based on your load, right? That's what you're going to do. And that's traditionally what you would do anyway. So that's why we kind of get that 83% rule out of the way. In a multifamily like this, you're not going to be able to do that. Now, you could do it to the individual dwelling units, right? That would be a feeder. And if you do the feeder to the individual dwelling units, then you could use 310.12b for that application, right? And again, we're going to cover all that in a unit that we really dig deep into 310.12. All right. Now, in our course, multifamily using the standard method of calculation and the optional method is covered in Unit 11. So anybody that's checking that out or looking into our course, Unit 11 will go into all of those things. You're going to do a calculation for a 6-unit complex and also a 12-unit complex. Okay. So don't worry, our course is going to cover all of that material for you. All right, let's kind of work this thing out real quick. Since we can't use 310.12, let's kind of look at what we've got here. So C, which is pointing here, it's kind of just for reference, going to use the other one. It says, now, if the calculated load, that means you did the math, You calculated it up. You used a worksheet. You came up with it. You used either part 3 of Article 220 using the standard method, or you used the optional method in part 4. However you did it, you came up with a calculation. So if the calculated load for each service disconnect is 350 amps, okay, so that's what we calculated out. And then, of course, with that, that's what we determined the size of the service disconnect, right? We did a load calc, whatever it was, and that's how we sized our service disconnect. Okay, makes sense. Now, it says the conductors shall have an ampacity of at least 350 amperes. Okay, now, in accordance with table 310.16, you heard me talk about that before, ampacity table. Again, we can't use 310.12. This wouldn't apply. So we're going to use the full ampacities from the table. In accordance with 310.16, the minimum size conductor is a 500 kcmil copper or a 700 kcmil aluminum. Now, a 500 kcmil copper, on an exam, y'all all know by now, you always assume copper unless stated otherwise. They ask you for aluminum, then you use the aluminum. But if they don't state aluminum, again, always use copper. In this case, a 500 kcmil copper under the 75-degree terminals, which is probably what everything's going to be rated at, then what you've got is 380 amperes. Well, obviously, 380 ampere conductor can easily handle 350 amps of calculated load, and the overcurrent protected device is more than capable of protecting a conductor that's good for 380 amps. That's not a problem. D, right here, it says 2 main service disconnecting means supplying power to 12 units must be computed on the basis of 6 units per service, right? Obviously, again, this is 6 here, this is 6 over here, okay? And it's a 12-unit total complex, all right? We got that. Performing a service calculation on 12 units and then dividing that by 2 is simply incorrect, okay? So you're going to do the calculation, what? Based on 6 at a time, because they're separated out. So you're doing 6, and then you're doing the calculation for 6 over here for these conductor sizing, all right? Now, all service supplying dwelling units, okay, the dwelling units shall be provided with a surge protected device, SPD. The SPD shall be an integral part of the service equipment or shall be located immediately adjacent thereto, unless it is located at each next level distribution equipment downstream towards the load. Okay, so the SPD shall be a type 1 or a type 2. And also, if there's a retro or remodel and you replace the service, then you have to install SPDs. Now it's a requirement, right? So in this case, you can put it at the service, or you can put it at the next downstream distribution, which would be at each one of these feeder panels, if you wanted to do it that way. And it'd be type 1 or type 2. Now, type 1 typically is on the supply side of the service disconnect, and type 2 is typically on the load side. But check with your manufacturer, because I believe manufacturers make some type 1s that can go on the supply side or the load side. But they typically will be used on the supply side, and typically type 2 will be on the load side. Of course, if you want to learn more about the SPDs and all the things associated with that, then here, all you do is go to 230.67, and you notice that we put that in chevrons right here. And so for anybody that's new to the course, anytime you see a chevron, you're going to go there. You're definitely going to go to wherever in the code it tells you and read it. So we're going to do that right now so that you can kind of see what you would do if you're using the studying properly, the techniques properly. All right, so we're going to go to the code. And we're going to look at 230.67a. So I'm here. I'm in 230 already. So let's go to 67 right here. All right, now see all this new? The formatting is new, and it's new for the 2020 edition of the National Electrical Code. That's what we're in. So surge protected devices, it says all services supplying dwelling units shall be provided with surge protected devices, SPD, okay? And I don't think there's any illustration, no, okay. Location, where can these SPDs be? All right, as you saw in our language here, it says SPD shall be an integral part of the service equipment, either right on the bus, a plug on the bus, or built into the equipment, whatever, or shall be located immediately adjacent thereto. So that means that some of the ones that you see for services. Now, this is not just for multifamily, right? This applies where? All services, okay? So some people will see the ones that mount right next to the panel. And then you got a, kind of a nipple over to it, and then the conductors go straight to a breaker. Manufacturer tells you to keep those conductors as short as possible. We don't want a bunch of loop-de-loops, okay? Keep it short as possible. But there is an exception here, as you can see, and the exception says, like we read, it says the SPD shall not be required to be located at the service equipment as required if B, if, I'm not sure what that is, if B, okay, if in, so required in B, I'm sorry. So let me read that again. This SPD shall not be required to be located in the service equipment as required in B, which is what we just read, if located at each next level distribution equipment downstream towards the load. Okay, so you could have them at the actual dwelling units. How about that? And that would be fine. And it might be just a plug-in on the bus, that type of thing, keeping it simple, stupid. And that's probably the majority of how they're done today. Although some of the manufacturers make really nice ones that go immediately adjacent, and they have a little viewing screen, and they can be mounted recessed or surface mounted, however you want to do that. But again, today, a lot of people are just using the plug-on ones and getting it over with. They just take the place of two breakers and plugs right in. And of course, here you also see the types, and then of course, replacement. This is the important one here to remember, that where service equipment is replaced, all the requirements of this section shall apply. So if somebody is doing a service replacement and it wasn't there at the old service, it wasn't required at the time, obviously, because this is a 2020 code. But when you put that service back, guess what? They're now going to have to put in these surge protective devices. So if you have a big multifamily complex and they change the service or do some changes there, then it's going to affect the SPDs. So it may or may not be as simple as just going to each one of the dwelling units and doing a plug-in. It may not be that simple. So it can possibly get complicated in how this is to be applied, but code's pretty clear you're going to do it. Now, if you want to learn about the different types of SPDs, so you have overcurrent protection, right? And you have over voltage protection, and that's basically what SPDs are doing, the over voltage protection. So when you're looking at that, you're saying, okay, where do I go in the code for over voltage protection? Well, you're going to go back here. You see where it says 240 for overcurrent protection? We'll see under it now there's a 242, and we'll just kind of look at it. And you'll notice the N right here. That means this is new for 2020. Now, not new in a sense they didn't exist. They did exist. Okay, they were other locations in the code, and they got relocated here under 242 because it seemed to make more sense to kind of put it next to overcurrent, and then of course then you have over voltage protection. So here's where you'll see the SPDs, right? Talking about SPDs right here. And you kind of can go down it, and a good table that kind of connects you with other locations and other articles that may be applicable. But if you go down here, you'll see surge protected devices for 1,000 volts or less. Okay, and you'll see listing and yada, yada, yada. And here it starts talking about the type 1s and at the service and the connections. And here's type 2s, gives you some information about those. Type 3s, type 4s, and locations. And all. So anything you want to learn about SPDs are going to be here in 242. And of course, you also have surge arresters, which are over 1,000 volts. That's also here as well. That was also in a different article, and it was relocated here to 242, right? So it's all conveniently located down in Article 242 if you want to learn the different types of SPDs and their applications and all that. But when it comes to services, the direct requirement to install SPDs comes from 230.67, okay? All right, let's go and get back to our material. All right, so that's all we're going to talk about in this episode, talking about the services, the service conductors, and hopefully you got something out of that. The next series that'll come up, we're going to be talking about conductor clearances over flat roofs, and we'll be talking about it maybe over pitched roofs and all those goodies involved in Unit 11 of our Fast Tracks program. But I'm giving you a look by doing these videos to kind of give you an idea of what's in the program, and maybe you learn something from the material that I'm presenting. Again, if you want to get in a really good code-based program, you really want to think about coming to our Fast Tracks program. Again, right here, you're going to learn so much about the National Electrical Code. It's just going to open up your eyes. The illustrations are wonderful. You're going to wonder why we do what we do, and it's because we really are passionate about teaching you the code, not just helping you get past an exam, not just making you a better electrician in the field, but making you a supertrician, right? Good electricians know how to wire, know how to pull things, know how to bend conduit, know a little bit about code, but great electricians know both, okay? They know how to install it, but they know the reason why they're installing it. And that's what our course is there, is to supplement that good electrician to become a great electrician and learn more about the National Electrical Code, which, again, has this relationship with the installation. Everything that you do, whether you admit it or not, is based on code. The skills you learn are to install things in a safe manner. The National Electrical Code is a minimum safety standard, whether you like it or not, whether you like that definition of it or not. So, the more you learn about code, the better you're going to be, and that's why I'm here. So hopefully you got something out of this episode, and maybe you'll come back and join us for future episodes. Again, I promise to start keeping these videos short, and that's what I'm going to do. So folks, we'll catch you in the next video. Till next time, stay safe, and God bless.
Morning coffee, vanilla latte served to go. Morning coffee, vanilla latte served to go. I drink it slow.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode here at Electrical Code Academy. My name is Paul Abernathy, and I'm your instructor for today. If you're interested in our Fast Tracks program, which is the most comprehensive program to learn the National Electrical Code, whether it's for exam prep or maybe you're a manager or a leader in the field and you really need to learn the National Electrical Code, then right here, fasttracksystem.com, go watch the demo. It is by far the best exam prep and National Electrical Code learning program. So it's 100% online, and you do it at your own pace. You have access to it for an entire year. We do yearly courses. More than enough time for you to be able to absorb the importance of all the different parts, sections, subdivisions of the National Electrical Code. Of course, you get to join me personally every Wednesday night for live sessions over on our Zoom channel, and it's only available to Fast Track students and subscribers to Fast Tracks Tube. So make sure you join us if you're one of those members. We'd love to have you. But it is, again, well worth the investment for you to learn the National Electrical Code. All right, let's get into it today. So one of the questions we're going to talk about, again, here is, can you have more than one service to a building? General rules in 230.2 is no, you have one service to a building, and that's probably what you have at your dwelling. But there are occasions when you have more than one to a building. Okay? So we're looking at that, but the real topic today is when you have more than 6 disconnects per building, and how would that happen? Because we know the rule typically is not more than 6 disconnects per service, but there are allowances in the code where you might have more than one service to the building. So let's go look at the course material and we'll kind of work our way through it. All right, so we're in the Fast Track system, and this is in Unit 10. Okay, so Unit 10, we're talking a little bit more about services and getting more in depth in those. And here you see it says more than 6 disconnects per building. Okay, so everybody kind of says, well, I thought you could only have one service per building. Well, there are conditions where you can have more than one at a building. You have to meet these conditions. Now, your normal dwelling, that's not going to be the case. You're going to have one service at your dwelling. But here is example, as you see on the screen. This is a multi-family application. So there's a lot of dwelling units, and this is a rather large complex. So it might facilitate the need for more than one service. So what we're going to do is we're going to examine it. We're going to look at these illustrations. They are really great illustrations, and try to piece together what this all means, because we want to get rid of this thought that you always can only have one service to a building. It's not always the case. So let's look at it right here. So if you look at the material right here, here's the topic: more than 6 disconnects per building, and we're talking service disconnects. All right, A is pointing to the building. It says here, 2 services supply one building as permitted in 230.2C2. Okay, so we're going to highlight that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go look at the code, because we want to look at C2. But while we're there, let's go on and look at the other applications where we may have more than one service at a building. Let's kind of go over to the code. And here's what we got here. Now, I'm using Link, by the way. For those that aren't familiar with Link, it's a product that's put out by NFPA. You get access to the NEC going all the way back to 2008, but you get also access to a bunch of other NFPA documents just to make your life so easier if you're the leader of the project, and you might have some other NFPA standard come up. And it also has a very intuitive feature where you can type in certain things and it'll bring up all of the different references, code references around a certain topic. Like you could type in bathrooms and it'll bring up all of those code related items about bathrooms and all the circuits and the items that may be in a bathroom and whether GFCI. So it's a really neat feature. It's a great little tool to have in your back pocket. It costs about $125 or something like that annually. Well worth the investment. I use it on my computer. I also have it on my phone. So it just makes it so convenient to look up the National Electrical Code when you need it. Okay. Now you can't use it on an exam, so keep that in mind. All right, so as we look here in the code, here's what you've all probably heard before right here. Now I'm going to highlight it so you can see a little better, and I'll read it, make it easy. A building or other structure served shall be supplied by only one service unless permitted in 230.2A through D. And of course, for the purpose of 230.40 exception number 2, only underground sets of conductors, 1/0 and larger, running to the same location and connected together at their supply end, but not connected together at their load end, shall be considered to be supplied by one service. So I'll explain that here in a second. But you see that the general rule here is one service per building, unless it's allowed, or permitted, I should say, in 230.2A through D. So we have to look at that. So when can I have more than 2 services to a building? Well, under special conditions. So I could have a building and I want to bring a separate fire pump to the building, and we have rules in 695 that would permit that. So I have the service, but I bring another service to the building for the specific need for fire pumps. Okay, so that's another service. That's fine. I could have another service to a building where I need to have my primary power and I had to back up. Then for emergency systems, then I could bring another service that simply supports the emergency system. Do that with legally required. Okay, I can do that with optional standby. Have that come into the building. That's not necessarily going to be a service, but I could have optional standby. Parallel power production systems coming in, other types of energy producing systems supplying the building. It's kind of one of those things where people won't need to confuse it with here's the service, which is connected to the utility. And then you have other sources of power from other power production products, PV, things like that, coming to the building. And we don't get a confusion. It's still one service, but we have other permitted special conditions that can bring other sources to the building. And then, of course, you have systems designated for connection to multiple sources of supply for the purpose of enhanced reliability. So you could have governmental institutions, maybe under COPS systems or whatnot, that you could have others services brought to a building. For example, it would be totally okay. Special occupancies. So I can have additional services brought to a building for special occupancies by special permission. So getting something in writing from the AHJ that would warrant that we need multiple services to this building, that would be okay. Again, special permission of who? The AHJ. Okay, they're the ones that are giving you that special permission. It says additional services shall be permitted for either of the following. So if you can warrant one of these 2 items, then the AHJ should be able to give you a special permission. Okay, written permission. Write it down. That way you have it. So number one, it says a multi-occupancy building where there is no available space for service equipment accessible to all occupants. Okay, so it might be a multi-occupancy building of substantial size, and it might warrant additional services to this facility. Then that would be one acceptable method. And then it says a single building or other structure sufficiently large to make two or more services necessary. So if you kind of look at our illustration, and that's not the one that's being used here, but if you have a large building, then it's one of those things where you're going to need additional supply. Okay. One of the things is maybe the building is so large that the utility can supply from that transformer. It can't supply all of the load that's there. So they might have to have a second utility transformer. Okay, so that's a second service coming to this building, and that's okay. And at each one of those services, I can have up to six service disconnects, generally speaking, for each one of those services. Okay, and I don't know if there's an illustration. Yeah, they really don't have anything, and I'm just going to check to see. No, I was hoping maybe some graphics. All right, so now remember back on our illustration, it was using C2 for this building here, so we're going to look and see what this is. But capacity, okay? And so this is kind of goes hand in hand with the special occupancy one here too, where it's talking about a single building or other structure sufficiently large to make two or more services necessary. The reason that one's that way by special permission is, again, that's one of those conversations you have to have with the AHJ. The building is really large. Maybe it's a single mall complex. It makes sense to have multiple services. Okay, by special permission, they can do that. Now, going more into the capacity allowance here, and that's what C is. It says additional services shall be permitted under any of the following. Number one, where the capacity requirements are in excess of 2,000 amps at the supply voltage of 1,000 volts or less. So maybe the engineer has calculated the load. The actual load is in excess of 2,000 amps for this building. It makes sense to have multiple services to be able to supply that demand. Okay, that's a no-brainer. And that would, again, rather large, complex. Number two, and this is the one that's being used in the illustration, it says, where the load requirements for a single-phase installation are greater than the serving agency normally supplies through one service. Okay, so, for example, in this building, let's say that building is a 120/240 building in the illustration, and I will go back, we'll see the other ones, but I will go back so we can kind of visualize this building for whatever it's worth here. So maybe the situation is that one transformer is a 120/240 transformer, but maybe it only can handle a certain number of amps, right? And so they literally have to have another service because it doesn't have the capability. And the utility will let you know this, that transformers put out what they are, okay? Output is what it is. So in this case, they design it, and the serving utility cannot support all the power that's needed at this facility. Well, most certainly under this capacity requirement, any AHJ or a plans examiners or whatnot would clearly say, let me have an additional service there to meet capacity, basically breaking this complex up so that each one of the services can handle what it's rated for. Okay? We have to remember that the utility can only supply so much power. They're the ones that control the transformers. They have a certain amount of capacity. If the building is of sufficient size that whatever's in that area by the utility, whatever power rating they have at that area, transformer sizes, whatever the capacity they can handle, your building might exceed that. So in this case, it's single phase applications. So they would add another transformer, and that would be okay. And that doesn't need special permission from the AHJ. That is something that if the utility states that they can't supply the capacity with one transformer, that they'd have to have another one, then that's multiple services to a building. That's okay. Perfectly fine. You can have up to 6 disconnects per service on that for that example. All right, so let's kind of go back. And we were talking about special permission. So the last one here, again, capacity is by special permission. It sounds just like it is. So you could maybe not have item 1, item 2, but you go to the AHJ and your capacity and area, it warrants having multiple services to a building. Well, by special permission means the AHJ has to give that special permission. They may or may not do it. And then you look for one of the other aspects that would allow you to have more than one service and try to tackle it from that angle. But most AHJs, again, they're not too awful concerned. As long as labeling and everything is done right, and as long as you have something plausible in the code to support what you want to do, then most of them are pretty open to that. If an AHJ is not, then remember, you can always go over their head if you have to. Or you could contact, in this case, you could contact the utility and plead your case, and they don't care. If they're going to bring 2 services to a building, they'll give you a support letter, and you can take that to the AHJ and see if that doesn't change their opinion or not. But personally, as an AHJ in the past, or serving as a deputy for the AHJ, because I wasn't the building official, but I was a supervisor or head of it, so I was serving in their capacity. I would have no problem with this. As long as everything else is done to code and it's safe, I really don't care how many services to a building, as long as it meets something in one of these allowances. Right? Any building gets 1 service unless you meet one of these, and then we can have that discussion, right? All right, so I'm still here. Any codes? So again, let's see if there's anything here. No, that's just a bunch of extra stuff. Oh, by the way, if you do have Link, you get all this great commentary, this enhanced material. Take your time to read it. If you're working in this area, it is some great material, and it will broaden your knowledge. The next one that gives you the ability here is D, is different characteristics. What does that mean? Now, it says additional services may be permitted for different voltages, frequencies, phases, or for different uses, such as different rate schedules. Easiest way I can explain this one to you is if you have a building that has 3-phase, and that's your service, and it's maybe not of a capacity that we're required to. It's a single building, but it has 3-phase, and now you want to bring a single phase to it. If it's available, then you could bring single phase to it. So maybe there's a 48277 there, and rather than step down transformers or changing transformers, so maybe they want to bring a single phase drop to it. That's perfectly fine. Those are different characteristics, right? So that's a good example of where and that's a more practical example of where you might have 2 services to a building due to characteristics. In this case, voltage characteristics. They're different, that type of thing, right? It's just an example. Now, the other one would be, like it says here, such as different rates. So sometimes you can have buildings that'll bring a power to a building, but maybe they bring a separate rate because maybe their water heaters or maybe something has a different rate scale. And then that might be the same voltage, but it's a different rate. Okay, so that would be for a different use. Now, rather than just supply the building, this is supplying some different use at the building, whatever that may be. Then it could be the same voltage class, but it's a different use. And they use this as an example of a rate scale. They're charging you different fees for different rate scales. So you could go that avenue for it as well. And the commentary on that, here's an example I gave here. Different characteristics, 12240 single phase, and then of course they want 3-phase 4-wire 48277. Okay, maybe there's a rate change difference associated with the different voltages as well. All of that would lend itself. Here, I'll put that there so you can pause it and read it if you want to read it. All of that lends itself to being able to have more than one service to this building if you meet the different characteristics allowance here. Okay, and of course identification. This one here, I'll close this down. This one here says where a building or structure is supplied by more than one service. So again, assuming you met one of the other permitted allowances to have more than one service, provided that's the case, then it says, or any combination of branch circuit feeder or services, a permanent plaque or directory shall be installed at each service disconnect location denoting all other services, feeder, or branch circuits supplying that building or structure and the area served by each. Okay, and also you notice that it also shows 225.37. So this is also going to apply to outside branch and feeder applications as well, if you happen to have that. So going back to the illustration, here you can see in our building right here, then you're going to have labels, and you're going to have labels that say where the other service set of service disconnects are. Maybe this one says other service disconnects are located on the south side of the building, and this one says it's on the north side of the building. Okay, and it lets people know. And at the other one, it'll say there's a service located at the north side. So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about by identification and whatnot. Okay. All right, so let's kind of keep on going through our graphic here. So that was the building. That's a lot of detail, but that's the building. Next, B, here it says the installation of two 6-gang meter sockets, each without a main service disconnect. Okay, again, there's no main, so it's a breaker for this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. So that's the 6 disconnect allowance right there. No main there. And so you're limited to 6. Granted, now, if we had a main, then you wouldn't be limited to 6. Right? So in this case, there is a breaker at each meter. Right? Very common in some of those applications because it might be 100 amp breakers that feed out to individual dwelling units or whatnot. Okay, so and its location is not a violation. So 6 disconnect allowance here, same here. This building was judged that it needed to have more than one service, so that's what it got, and that's not a violation here. C. Okay, so C seems to be pointing here. It says where a building or structure supplied by multiple services or by any combination. We just saw that. We read it. We're kind of ahead of the game. That it's going to require markings to tell you that, and we already read that, and that's what this is talking about. So this is telling you this is a service disconnect, and it's to tell you that there's another one located somewhere else. Okay. And of course D right here. Again, if you want to know the 6 disconnect rule and understanding that right here. Section 230.71b. Remember, anytime you see these chevrons, you want to make sure, folks, you pause and you go read this rule. Because it kind of, even though we give it to you here, it's so much better for your learning process to go from the course to the code, from the course to the code when necessary. It just kind of helps lock those things in your head. Plus, it helps you maneuver the code. Right? So it's so important when you're taking an exam because the more you can get used to maneuvering and things will become more memorable, it'll help you in the stressful situation of an exam. If you're in the field, you're working, and you have your code book, doing this gets you so familiar and gets rid of that anxiety from going from code book to different sections, to different parts. And maybe you're not using the course, but you're having something that's real in your face on a job site. And what this does is it allows you to process it. And then you're used to navigating through the code, thinking about that question, trying to dissect what the root of that question is, and then helps you go through the code book. So we're trying to get you moving in and out of the code book. It's a process. Don't fight it. Just kind of go with it. All right, so section 230.71b right here, okay, permits a maximum of 6 disconnects per service, not per building. It's per service. So obviously, if I have 2 services to a building, I can have 6 at each, right? Now, if more than one service feeds a building, each service can have 6 disconnects. Okay, makes sense? All right, we have some cautions here. So we always want to read these cautions because they're usually giving us some very good information. So caution, service conductors supplying a building or other structure shall not pass through the interior of another building. Okay, that's important. That's 230.3, and it's pretty much exactly what it says. Now, forget, feeders can pass through a building, right? Because they're protected on their supply side. Service conductors are not protected, right? So they really, only thing that service conductors have is overload protection because it terminates into a service disconnect with a service as an overcurrent protective device. And on the load side of that, there is protection between what? Well, there's overcurrent protection, short circuit, ground fault, and overload. But on the line side, the service conductors, it doesn't have the luxury of what happens on the load side of a circuit breaker. But the circuit breaker can limit the load on the load side from affecting the service conductors and overloading it. So the overcurrent protective device at your service, it does protect those service conductors from overload, but it does not protect them from short circuit and ground fault protection, right? So we do not want those conductors running through the building, okay? So, and of course, later on in some of our other courses, you're going to see that the rules for having an emergency disconnect on the exterior of a 1 and 2 family dwelling, which doesn't apply to other than 1 and 2 family, is going to require that emergency disconnect. And more often than not, that's where you're also going to have your service disconnect. But there's some allowances there in 230.85 that we'll obviously cover in future episodes. Okay, or if you're in our Fast Tracks program, you're going to be so immersed in that you're going to totally understand the labeling requirements and all the things that apply to the 230.85, which is new for the 2020 edition of the National Electrical Code, and it did not change. It expanded a little bit and made it easier to understand in the 2023 edition, but in the 2020 edition, it's pretty straightforward, and you have some options there. Okay. All right, so what else we have? We have a note that says each service must be connected to the same grounding electrode. That's in 250.58. Again, important to look at things like that. So even though I have two services there, they're going to use the same electrode. And if they each had an electrode system established at them, say 2 ground rods or whatnot, then those ground rods are going to be connected together. Or you could have both of them, services, come to 2 ground rods. Let's say if you were using ground rods, you have one, unless you can prove it's 25 ohms or less, then you add a second, right? You have to supplement it. We covered that in our grounding and bonding course. So you can't just have one ground rod unless, of course, you have a ground resistance meter. It's not a regular voltage meter, not a DMM meter. It has to be a ground resistant meter or a 3-point fall of potential meter, which means you have to do some testing in order to determine whether it's 25 ohms or less. So you're not just going to check it with an ohm meter. It's not how it works. But if you did have 25 ohms or less, then you could just have one rod, for example. I'm just using rods as an example. Now, in our building, by the way, chances are this building has concrete with rebar, and it probably has a UFER ground. And if you don't know what UFER grounds are, hey man, you really should get our grounding and bonding course so that you can really immerse yourself in understanding all the aspects of grounding and bonding. A lot of the hazards that take place in a structure is not directly due to the wiring, but a lot of times it's due to the miswiring, and a lot of that can be the grounding and bonding aspects, which energize metal parts and becomes a real unsafe condition. The thing about electricity is it still tries to work, even if you install it wrong, right? It's still going to work. The light bulb's going to light, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's safe. And so that's the thing. Electricity is silent, has no smell. The only time you can hear electricity is when you're near a transformer and you hear it buzzing. Other than that, it can be a deadly killer. So we have to be careful with that. Okay. All right. So that's pretty much what we've got there. All right. So there we're going to stop. That's kind of talking about the 6 disconnects. Again, we can get very deep into that, like 230.40, exception 1, 3, 5. But we're not going to do it for this episode. This episode, we're going to try to keep these episodes shorter. But that is a great episode talking about multiple services to a building and looking at 230.2. Hopefully you understand that a little bit. Our next episode, we're going to go into service conductors and talk about them a little bit and all the nuances with service conductors. So folks, hopefully you got something out of that. And make sure you subscribe to the channel, and also go over to fasttrackstube.com to get all of these videos, because where you're watching it now, it's only going to be there for a limited time before it's going to end up over on Fast Tracks Tube, and that's the only place you're going to find it. So these are sneak previews over on our other channels, but make sure you subscribe over on Fast Tracks Tube to continually get more updated content, especially our 2023 NEC series, as our new Fast Tracks for 2023 NEC comes out here very shortly. Till then, folks, stay safe. God bless.
Morning coffee, vanilla latte served to go. Drink. Morning coffee, vanilla latte served to go. Drink it slow.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Electrical Code Academy. My name is Paul Abernathy. I'm your instructor for today, and thanks for joining me. Today we're going to continue our our knowledge in understanding services and service conductors and wiring and clearances. And on today's episode, we're going to kind of cover 3 topics. So this is going to maybe be not too awful long, but we're going to make sure that we cover 3 important topics today about clearances for service conductors and things like that. And maybe get rid of some of the myths that people may have. But hey, before I do that, I want to remind you that if you really want to learn the National Electrical Code and not just dabble in it, not just go to the social medias and post something you think is code, but you really want to kick your game to the next level. You want to not be just a good electrician who knows how to bend conduit and pull wire, but you want to become a great electrician. And all great electricians understand and have a drive to learn the National Electrical Code. If you want to do that, we've got the program for you. There is no program out there better than ours. If you want to pass an exam, you just want to be better at your trade, you want to be a leader, then you want to get in our Fast Tracks program with all of the competency reviews that I personally grade every single one of them and give you feedback. And if you want that and you want to join us on Wednesday nights and really get engaged in learning code and how to dissect questions and ask any codes, I'm basically there to be a consultant for you. If you have any questions, then do me a favor. Go right here. Go to fasttracksystem.com. Choose a course. Watch our demo. The demos are on every page of the programs, generally all of them. If you're doing exam prep, then it's Fast Tracks Black. Or the Fast Tracks Plus. The Plus basically gives you 12 months access to our exclusive video platform, which is Fast Tracks Tube. So it's included in there. That's what the Plus is all about. But you can watch a demo on that. Or maybe you're licensed already and you want to really deep dive into residential, commercial, or even industrial wiring. We have courses on that really deep dive. Maybe your drive is to learn more about grounding and bonding. Well, we have an excellent course on grounding and bonding. And most people know I serve on Code Panel 5. And so we deal with Article 250 as well as Article 200. And so that's where we spend most of our time when we're doing code panel review, is really digging into things about grounding and bonding. So if that's something that you're weak in, then you most certainly want to check that out. So just go to our website and just take a few minutes, look around, see what you like. If you got any questions, there's a comment button up there. You click it, send me a comment. I'm more than happy to help you out and give you some direction. But we're here to make sure that you learn the National Electrical Code. That's what Coffee Hour is all about. So hopefully you get something out of every one of these little videos that we put out, and you do think about going over and joining the Fast Tracks system. Become part of the Fast Tracks family. We also have a chat feature. We have a message board. We have so many ways to support you. It's not about just books. It's not about DVDs. It's not about watching a random YouTube video. We love code, and we make it interesting. So I want you to join our family. So if you get an opportunity to check it out, please do. Okay, enough of that commercial. Let's kind of get into the course. We're going to talk today about service wiring clearances first. Then we're going to talk about clearances in general, like clearance to balconies, clearances of windows, when you have service conductors. And we're going to answer some of those myths that people may have on the subject as well. So let's go on and get into it. All right, so we're going to start this journey. Obviously, we are in our Fast Tracks program. Again, if you're interested in it, you can go to fasttracksystem.com and watch our demo, learn about all the features you have, the built-in flashcards, all the good stuff. But this happens to be out of Unit 10, and we're talking about service wiring clearances. Okay, so let's kind of look at it a little bit and see if we can't raise the education level of everybody that may be watching this. All right. 10-3A, conductors clearance over flat roofs. So majority of the commercial buildings have a flat roof, and you may have service conductors that come from the service drop down to a weatherhead with a mast. And you have to make sure that if it's an accessible roof and it's flat, that you have to make sure that I have a certain amount of clearance above it, okay? So let's kind of go look at it. So we have these great illustrations, and by the way, our entire program is made up of all these different illustrations and call-outs to kind of get you into the topic, summarizes it for you, but also gives you code references. And if you haven't heard me talk about it before, anytime you see a code reference that's between these little chevrons, you want to stop what you're doing, and you want to go to the code book and read it. Even though we might paraphrase something, you really need to go, and that's kind of the secret to our program. It's to work you in and out of the code book, not just to give you something you read and you don't know when to leave the material and go to the code book. You needed some guidance. You need some guidelines. And so that's why we have the chevrons. So what you do is you read it and then you stop and you go to the code book and you read the code section. Then you come back and it just makes things so much clearer and easier to understand. Plus, what else is it doing? It's teaching you to maneuver throughout the NEC. And that's what we're trying to do, is to get you to maneuver through the code, at least raise that comfort level of maneuvering. All right, so here we're looking at A. So A is right here. It says the service mast shall be strong enough to safely withstand the strain imposed by the service drop or overhead service conductors. Supplemental braces or guy wires may be necessary. Okay, so in this case, clearance above the roof, they were needing to maintain the clearance, and so they raised up the actual weatherhead on a mast, not only to have our clearance, right, but if it's up too high, they had to make sure that they have to put guy wires in, right? So all of that stuff. So we'll go look at that. So you see 230.28a. What you're going to do is pause and go look at it. But don't do it now. Don't do it now because we're going to do it. We're going to go to 230.28a and kind of look at these guy wires real quick. All right, so I'm over here in the code and I'm going to 230.28. So we'll go back a little bit. And we're going to go right here. Okay, so service masts and supports. Okay, so all this information is basically what we regurgitated, but let's talk about this strength. All right, obviously you're not going to extend PVC up, right? Heat of the day, bends, that tension from the service drop, obviously that's not going to happen. Again, so where the mast is actually supporting the drop, if it's utility service drop, or if you're the electrician and you ran the overhead service conductors, right? And we will talk about that. If you don't know the difference between overhead service conductors, service drops, service laterals, underground service conductors, service entrance conductor, if you don't understand all that, go to Article 100. It's pretty self-explanatory, but we obviously are going to have a video coming up on that. As you can see, I promised folks out there we had tons of videos coming. They're coming, and we're going to be breaking all these things down for you. And they're supplemental to our Fast Tracks program. So our Fast Tracks program is the key. But here we want to do some supplemental stuff and kind of help solidify the learning process. So here we are over in the code. It says the service mast shall be of adequate strength or be supported by braces and guy wires to withstand safely the strains imposed by the service drop or overhead service conductors. Hubs intended for use with conduit that serve as a service mast shall be identified for use as service entrance equipment. Now, talk about the strain. Now, it says adequate strength. Who determines what's adequate strength? Well, a lot of times the utility companies will tell you what they expect you to use. They'll say whether you're supposed to use rigid or IMC. Obviously, those have adequate strength. Now, whether EMT has adequate strength or not, again, it's going to be subject to the AHJ determining that strength. But in most cases, what we see is rigid or intermediate. Okay. Now, can anybody tell me, incidentally, what's wrong about this picture? Let me go back to it real quick. I just can't help it because I don't do the illustrations, even though they're great. I always like to bring things out. Anybody notice something here kind of weird? Yeah, notice that the service conductors run through the building. They're supposed to be on the outside of the building. Okay, you can't have service conductors running into the building. But in all fairness to this illustration, maybe this raceway is encased in 2 inches of concrete all the way down. Okay, just to be fair. But it's kind of little things that I notice. And again, everybody can be critical of everything. And again, that's just the nature of where we are. But again, we're using this to illustrate a point. Okay, so not really to nitpick the picture, but it's still a great graphic. Okay. Next, let's go, and that was B right here, and that is overhead service conductors shall not be readily accessible, and that is 230.24. Okay, since we're here, we might as well look at it. There are chevrons, and I want to get you used to doing that. Get you used to stopping in your code and going. So here's your clearances right here, and you'll see right here it says conductors shall have a vertical clearance of not less than 8 feet above the roof surface. Okay, now there are some allowances for reduction of clearance. We'll cover that in another video, but basically it's 8 feet like you see in the illustration that we had. There are some exceptions like when you have a roof pitch that is 412 or greater. Okay, it's pretty steep. then you can reduce it down to 3 feet clearance. But again, generally speaking, 8-foot clearance unless any of the exceptions apply. You have to make sure that we have that. Okay. All right, so let's kind of get back here. So that's where we went for that. Remember, chevrons, pawls, go look it up. I'll take this off real quick. All right, now let's look at C. What is C pointing out? Right here, okay. Right here, just what we just did. Conductors must have a minimum clearance of 8 feet above the roof surface, all right? Also, where does this apply? Where does this 8 feet? Is it just above the surface? Does it apply? So that's when we got to look at D. D, it says the vertical clearance above roof level must be maintained for a distance of at least 3 feet from all edges of the roof. Okay, now that's covered in 230.24a. Okay, we saw that, but we didn't go that far, so let's go on and finish that off. Let's go back. Just go back. Doesn't matter. Again, we're going to dissect these things right here. So we stopped at that 8 foot, but here is where it said the vertical clearance above the roof shall be maintained for a distance of at least 3 feet in all directions from the edge of the roof. Okay, so what does that mean for us? Well, this 8 feet, by the way, this 8 feet comes out 3 feet. Right here, see my mouse right here? It comes out 3 feet, then up 8 feet. And so you kind of think of this whole roof, it encompasses this whole roof, but it extends out 3 feet beyond the perimeter of the roof. So it's out 3 feet and up 8 feet. So it's basically like putting a cap on top of it, if you will. So that's where you have to maintain this clearance. And it has to be, starts at the 3 feet from the roof. And it has to be at that 8 feet and maintain that all the way to the point of attachment. Okay. So that's kind of the general rule. We're not talking any of the exceptions in this episode. That's kind of the general rule for that. All right. Now, people say, well, I would like to get deeper in all that. Well, our courses do get deeper in all that if you're in the Fast Tracks program. But here it says the vertical clearances of overhead service conductors covered in 230.24 pertain to every type of occupancy. Okay, so it's not just commercial. Maybe we see a rooftop here, but this also applies to dwellings as well. So again, don't think that we're looking at this and this is only commercial driven because it shows a picture of, say, a commercial building. No, this is all occupancies that this rule is going to apply to. Okay, and then refer to Unit 9 in this book or this course for detailed illustrations explaining vertical clearances. So in Unit 9, remember I told you we're going to have other units, and if you're in the Fast Tracks, Unit 9 will show you sloped roofs, flat roofs, all of those type of clearances are covered in that unit. So it's going to be so easy for you to understand it if you're in the Fast Tracks program. And again, this is low-hanging fruit, I like to call it, for electrical exams. And if you go over this stuff, then it's right here. So if you use the 3-wave method that I created more than 20 years ago, if you go with the 3-wave method and my specific way of doing it, and we have a video available for that. You just go search for it on YouTube or even on Fast Tracks Tube. And if you follow that, as you're going through it, you're going to see these questions that you just know the answer to. And if I take a question is basically you're allotted 2.5 minutes per question, but I can answer it in 5 seconds because I have that knowledge. Look at all the extra time you're going to build up for use on the much harder questions. And that's the method to the madness. The Fast Tracks program is trying to teach you things that you can remember, practical things, the more important things that come out of the code. We can't teach you everything in this document. This is a thick document, right? The code. Let me show you here, folks. Y'all have seen this. This right here, this is a thick book, right? And the text is really small. So that means it covers a lot of content. There's no way we can cover all of this, but we can teach you the skills to be able to navigate that book. And along the way, teach you a lot of stuff that you'll remember. And that's our goal. And that's called ballistic training. And that's kind of our approach to these chevrons and going to the code and back and forth and back and forth. All right. So I said we're going to do multiples in this unit. So we definitely are going to now get into clearances from openings. Again, we're talking service conductors. Now, when it comes to the openings, a couple things to remember. We are not talking about EMTs. We're not talking about rigid conduit. We're not talking about intermediate conduit. We're not talking about SE cable that has a sheathing or a jacketing covering. We're talking about the open conductors like from a service drop. And once they come out of that bundle, which is a multi-conductor cable, it's plexed at the manufacturer. Once it separates, now you have open service conductors or individual conductors. But in a lot of buildings, you also have steel drops that come down that have separate service conductors that come down. Okay, we call those open service conductors. So the key to this clearance from openings has everything to do with multi-conductor cables without covering or jacket, or the individual service conductors as they may come out of that assembly, even at the point of attachment where they separate. Those are individual service conductors, and we have clearances we have to keep away from. So let's look at that. Again, great illustrations. So let's look at A. A is pointing right here to the 3 feet. So here's our service drop right here. And we see it's connected to the side of the building. It says open service conductors or multi-conductor cables. This could be a service drop cable. Okay, it has no outer covering. It's not. They're just exposed conductors. It says must have a clearance of at least 3 feet from windows designed to open. That's important. Doors, porches, balconies, ladders, stairs, fire escapes, and similar locations. Where is that covered? 230.9a. That's a chevron. Pause your video. Go look it up to get a more healthier understanding of how this rule reads, especially because you're going to be flipping through it as you do an exam or in the real world, in the field, where it's really critical. You want to make sure that you get used to that going back and forth. Obviously, we've talked about that quite a bit. But the 3 feet clearance from windows that are designed to open. This doesn't apply to a window that is fixed, that is not designed to open. Doesn't apply to those. Also, it doesn't apply to the area above a window that's designed to open. It applies to the left of the window, to the right of the window, up to the very top of the window, but not above the window. And it also applies in front of the window. It also applies below. So it's 3 feet in all directions except for above the window. Okay? And remember, it does not apply to fixed windows that do not open. And that same 3 foot clearance applies again to doors, balconies, porches, ladders, all that kind of stuff. So let's kind of look at this illustration A right here. Okay, so here's a balcony. Here's a balconies here. Okay, and it says balconies right here. Okay, here's the ladders. But you see it's more than adequate here. It's at least 3 feet from any of that stuff. Now, if it had been a window right here, then that would be a problem, right? There would be an issue. Now, if that window was right here, but it was a fixed window, maybe just a round viewing window or something that's not designed to open, then that would not be an issue, okay? It's got to be a window that's openable or designed to open, okay? Now, let's look at B. So B is talking right here. So this is a clearance. Public streets, alleys, parks, parking areas subject to truck traffic and non-residential driveways require a minimum vertical clearance of 18 feet. Now that's in 230.24b4. Okay, so I'm going to highlight this because I want to talk about a point here that's really important for us to understand. Now I'm going to look at the notes first, and then we'll come back to look at this because I want to point out something because we are going to go to that. And if you got your code books, you can go on and go to 230.24b and wait for me to get there. But I'm going to get there. Because I want to talk about this clearance thing without getting too deep in clearances. We're going to obviously cover that in a different video and cover all the different clearances. But I want to talk about that one for a second. But let's look at this note real quick. So the note says, where a building exceeds 3 stories or 50 feet, okay, in height, branch circuits and feeder overhead lines must be arranged where practicable so that a clear area of at least 6 feet wide will be left adjacent to the building or beginning within 8 feet to facilitate the raising of firefighter ladders. Okay, that's 225.19a. So this has to do when your building's going a certain height, and now you have to clearance for things like rescue ladders and if there's a fire or whatnot. So this applies to the height of the building. That's all covered in 225.19e. Pretty straightforward to make sure that you have those clearances. That's a different clearance than what we're talking about from grade, right? That's in clearance specifically here. And again, where does it begin? It begins at 8 feet. right? And again, it goes up to the 50 feet or higher if it exceeds 3 stories or 50 feet. And so the clearance area is 6 feet wide. Okay, so you have to make sure that clearance there. All right, but let's talk about this here real quick. So take your code books. Let's go to 230.24b4. I'm going to go there. And we're already here, obviously, because we were on clearances. So remember, .24 seems to be clearances, right? But you'll notice that when it talks about clearances here, notice what it says. It says overhead service conductors. It does not say service drops. That's an important distinction, folks, because if you go look at Article 100 and look at the definition of service drops, this is typically controlled by the utility, and they dictate the height and clearances. Now, most of the time, they're going to mirror the NEC, but they dictate that. So when you install your point of attachment and your securement to the building, while it's not necessarily the NEC's responsibility for these clearances on service drops, you have to make sure, because obviously you got to meet the utilities requirements too, or they're not going to bring the service to your building. Now, you might have an inspector who's arguing about clearances because it's service drops, but that's not what 230.24 is all about. That's about overhead service conductors. So you might be saying to yourself, well, what the heck is an overhead service conductor if it's not a service drop? That's why definitions are so important in Article 100. Now, let me give you a scenario on this building. So let me before we read any more about this, I kind of prematurely took us there. Let's go back real quick to the image so I can explain something. Now, if the transformer was out here, and it's a utility transformer, okay, you see my mouse on the screen. If the transformer was out here on a pole, and it dropped from the pole to right here, then this would be under the exclusive control of the utility. So based on 90.2 of the NEC, that is outside of the scope of the NEC. And if it's outside of the scope of the NEC, then 230.24 can apply. However, let's say this property had a transformer that was 50 feet away, and the utility said, we're going to stop at this transformer. Yet it's too far for the service drop to go over to the actual building, so they have to put another pole in. Now, if they stop at the transformer, that is now the service point. And the drop from that transformer now to the pole, and in continuation from that pole to the side of this building, might be installed by the electrician. And if that's the case, that is called an overhead service conductors. And that is indeed governed by the National Electrical Code. In fact, that is what we're talking about here in 230.24. So I think it's an important distinction that most people won't argue anyway. They'll say, well, I'm just going to make sure that I put the point of attachment high enough that I'm going to meet 230.24, even if it's service drops, because they don't want the headache and the inspector who may or may not know the difference in 90.2 and whether this is covered or not. But also they're charged with something that if it's too low, then it's unsafe. And so they have to protect their what? The constituents of their community. They're public servants to the community. So at the end of the day, it becomes a compromise, and most people just follow 230.24. But I thought it was important for you to understand the language in the code to differentiate. Now, it's a great time for you to pause and go look at 90.2 and see what's covered and what is not covered in the NEC. But as you expected, we will cover that in other videos. Can't cover everything in one video. People have told me my videos are too long, so we're trying to break them down. Okay? All right, so let's go back to the code real quick. So here we are, and we're going to be looking at B. So here it is. Notice it also says vertical clearance of what? Overhead service conductors, not service drops. And that's a defined term in Article 100. So now let's assuming this is an overhead service conductor. Then you have the clearances right here. And we chose, in this case, it was 18 feet right here, 18 feet. Why? Because this looks like a commercial building and it's a non-residential driveway. So 8 inches for public streets, alleys, roads, parking areas subject to truck traffic, driveways, and other than residential properties and other lands such as cultivated, grazing, forest, and orchard. Okay? So It is subject to truck traffic, driveways that are other than residential. So obviously it's not a residential driveway like you'd have at your house or whatnot like that. So in this case, 18 inches of clearance, if those were overhead service conductors, is required. And you're just going to adjust your point of attachment on the side of that building in accordance with that. Okay. So, to get your clearance, if these were overhead service conductors, then obviously to get your clearance, you might move this point of attachment in the weatherhead higher in order to be able to facilitate that. Make sense? Okay. So that's clearances. So I do want to remind you folks that take the time to go look at 230.24 and get used to those different clearances, because that is low-hanging fruit on an exam, right? And now you know where the clearances are if they're overhead service conductors, okay? Let's kind of go down a little bit and see what else okay, we covered the note and we looked at all that, okay? So again, as I told you, we're going to cover one more in here. So again, this is going to be a little longer than normal, of the normal norm that I'm starting here. Vertical clearance above platforms. All right, so look at what we got here. So here you got to stay 3 feet away, right? We just saw that in the previous requirement, and so we had to stay at least 3 feet away, right? So let's look at this right here. So A, the drip loops. A drip loop's lowest point has a minimum vertical clearance of 10 feet. Okay, that's in 230.24B1. Okay, that's when we said we can go back and look at that just real quick because we do see chevrons. Here you go. Here's that vertical clearance. Again, overhead service conductors. Here's B1 right here. There's the 10 feet. And so this is at electrical service entrance to buildings, also at the lowest point of the drip loop of a building's electrical entrance, and above areas of sidewalks and above areas or sidewalks accessible only to pedestrians, measure from the final grade or other accessible surface. Okay, if you have a rooftop and it's accessible, then you still have drip loops. You're still going to have to maintain that clearance. So that's kind of one of those things you got to be aware of. The conductors might have to be at least 8 feet, but then if it's an accessible rooftop, then you got to worry about that 10-foot clearance to the drip loop. That might cause those conductors to have to move up higher. See how the code works? So many things get intertwined here, all right? And it says surface only for overhead service conductors supported on or cabled together with a grounded bare messenger where the voltage does not exceed 150 volts to ground. Okay, so that's a 122/40 drop. Any one of the phases to ground is going to be 120. So again, it does not exceed 150 to ground. Okay, so we have to have that 10-foot clearance. Okay, also I will tell you this applies also around your houses to that service, the drip loops. You need to have a minimum of 10-foot clearance. Okay, so again, low-hanging fruit on an exam, folks. 10-foot clearance. Okay. All right, let's come back to the illustration here. So that's where we got that 10 foot. So right here, it's 3 foot out, and obviously we have 10-foot clearance, and it's measured from this point where they can stand on the platform, right? You notice what it said in the code? It said what? It said lowest point of the drip loop in the building's electrical entrance, I'm reading here, and above areas or sidewalks accessible only to pedestrians, okay? So again, being able to reach those from the platform, you make sure that you have to have that clearance, all right? So in this case, minimum of 10 feet. And notice it says final grade or other accessible surfaces, okay? Now, going down a little bit, we're gonna look at, here's the conductors right here. So they kind of drop over, right? All right, so vertical clearances, the final span above or within 3 feet measured horizontally of platforms. You saw that earlier, platforms, windows, doors, or whatever, okay? It says the vertical clearance and the final span above or within 3 feet measured horizontally of platforms, projections, or surfaces that will permit personal contact must be maintained in accordance with 230.24b. And we saw that. So this platform, I have to have the clearance above it, right? But I also have to make sure that these conductors stay 3 feet away from it. right? So all of that, here's a door, gets to be 3 feet away from the door. Here's a window. We'll assume this is an openable window. Okay, stay 3 feet away from it. Of course, this is over the window, so that's not an issue. Okay, so we still have all these clearances that we have to be aware of. Okay. And then D, right here, here's the window. It says here, the 3-foot clearance required does not apply to the conductors run above the top of the window. We saw that. Okay, that was in the exception. If the window, it doesn't have to apply to the top of the window. Because the fire escape platform, because it is a platform, people stand on it, is accessible to pedestrians. The 10-foot vertical clearance takes precedent over the window clearance. Okay, so just because the window doesn't come into play above it, it still needs to be high enough because the platform is accessible to pedestrians. They can get there. So we still have to have the 10-foot clearance above it. Okay, see how all that works together? You have to be very aware of your situation, right? And if none of this was here, then these conductors would only have to be what? 10 feet from grade. But because of these platforms and people standing out here on it, it could be accessible. So it has to be 10 feet above. Make sense? All right. Let's see here. That's it. And I think that is probably all. Absolutely. That is all we're going to cover in this episode. As we get into another episode, we're going to get into panel boards and equipment and obviously access to overcurrent devices. All those things we're going to get into. So much to cover. We're just touching the tip of the iceberg. So much of the material is still below the water, and you're going to learn it all in our Fast Tracks program. So if you're interested in getting into a good code-based course, the Fast Track system is the only way to go. It's the only way to go. And you get so much information. You can print out any page you want from the course material, anything you want to print out, charts, guides, whatever. We do calculations. You're going to be so familiar with calculations when you're done here. And again, they still can be challenging, but you're going to have the basic foundation on how to solve these questions. And that's going to help you in the real world, not just on an exam. And that's what the program's all about. So if you're interested in it, check it out. If you have any questions, as always, let us know. We have a contact us button right there on our website at fasttracksystem.com. We hope you get something out of these episodes. Quick, trying to keep them concise, not too long. This is longer than normal that we're going to be doing, but hopefully you get the information. Thanks again, folks. God bless. Until next time, stay safe. Take care.
Morning coffee.
Hey folks, Paul Abernathy here. Welcome to another episode here of Coffee Hour with Paul. And we're going to do a little bit of exam prep today. We're going to kind of look at some questions, kind of talk about how you dissect a question, give you some tips on how I might read a question, especially if I'm in the stress of an exam. We don't have access to the index electronically to share on the screen, but of course you all should have your code book, and here's the index. And the index is not the holy grail, but it can bail you out when you're having some trouble. So you want to make sure you get very fluent, okay, in using the index. And of course, we'll talk about that. Now, a couple things I want to mention before we get into a couple questions today on this really quick lesson for you. We want to make sure that you understand that when you get access to a set of questions, whether it's 25 questions, whether it's 100 questions, 50 questions, it doesn't really matter. You need to take those questions and really beat them to death. In other words, you look at a question, you need to dissect every piece of that question. You need to use the index. You need to go back and forth. You need to look at keywords and say, well, maybe I could have found the answer under that keyword, or maybe I could have found it under that keyword. And then you're going to go to the index and you're going to come back and you're going to go back and come back. Now, the misconception that people have, and I've had over 32 years of teaching how to maneuver and understand the NEC. And I've tried to keep it as simple as possible. In order to learn, you have to train the brain. And you'll learn what's in the index and what is not in the index, but you'll learn how it's second nature to go to the index. It's, again, not the holy grail, but it can help you out of a real bind if you understand how it works. Every question on an exam should have some point of it that will get you somewhere. And it's not going to be exact, but something in it should lend you to knowing where you might go into the index, or you just have to use what we call trade knowledge. Now, of course, there's scanning techniques we call bold scanning, and we'll kind of show you that. And there's deductive reasoning. It's removing the obvious and then increasing your odds. And of course, there's another video I have out called the 3-wave method that kind of shows you the right way that you need to tackle an electrical exam. But if anybody ever tells you that if you get a set of questions, if they tell you that you have to try to time yourself when you first sit down with these questions, if they tell you you have to time yourself so that you do them in under 2 minutes, don't listen to that educator. They're setting you up for failure. Now, if you've been studying, if you're in a structured program like our Fast Tracks program, which gives you extensive training on the NEC, then that's fine. You can use exam questions to test your skill right there in the last 2 weeks or so before your exam to really start honing those last minute skills and give you that confidence. But up until that point, you do not want to take a question for advantage. You don't want to take it and just not use it for its full value, I guess what I should say. And so we're going to show you how you would do that. And you need to do that with every question. And it might get frustrating at first. You might say, well, I feel like I'm spending too much time on a question. That's okay. Because you're learning how to look at a question and start focusing on a question. And the number one thing that people have trouble with is reading comprehension. So if you can fix that reading comprehension, the ability to look at a question, to read it, understand that there are triggers in there, and even the answers may be relevant triggers. We'll see that probably on a couple questions today. And it's okay if it takes you a long time. That's all right. You're still learning. So let's jump on into a couple questions. I gave you a bit of a pep talk there, but let's go on and jump into some and see what we got. Okay, first question we're going to look at here today. It says, a metal underground water pipe may serve as a grounding electrode where it is in direct contact with the earth at least blank feet or more. Okay, now remember, you may know the answer right off the top of your head. And if you were doing my 3-wave method, then you're going to answer that question and you're going to move on. Okay? That's fine, because in that first wave, you're going to answer what you know. You're going to mark electronically ones that you take a minute or so that you can't find. Just mark it electronically and go on to the next one. Do not get bogged down on a question. You will have time, if you follow that process, you will have time to spend a little more time with that question. And you might find that you find the answer while you're looking up other questions throughout your exam. So that's what we want to focus on. So let's look at this real quick. So a couple things that stick out to me here is we're talking about a metal underground water pipe electrode. Okay, that's a grounding electrode. And it tells us right here, grounding electrode. And it's asking about what does it take for a metal underground water pipe to be a grounding electrode. Okay, so one of the things you can do if you had no idea, well, I'm sure you all know, okay, that this is going to be in Article 250, but that's not good enough for us. We need to dig down deeper and say, okay, metal underground water pipe, grounding electrodes, okay, those are key triggers that we want to use for the index. So you want to pause this video, that's fine. You can go to the index. I'm going to let it roll, and I'm going to go to the index as well. I have an index right here. I do not have an electronic one because NFPA does not make the index available. That's because it has a search feature, but that doesn't do much for us educators who like to use the electronic version. Okay, so we need to use the index. So the first thing I'm going to say, here's how we dissect. You ready? Now this is a simple one to dissect, but I want to use it because it kind of illustrates what we're talking about. So the first thing that we'll dissect is metal underground water pipe. That is exactly a type of electrode. So we're going to go back to the index and we're going to see if there's anything under metal underground water pipe. So I'm going to go back in here and see if there is anything in here that might have to do with a metal underground water pipe. Now, it may or may not be in here, but that's the whole point of why we're doing it. All right, so we're going to look here and say, is there anything that looks like metal underground water pipe? Okay, I don't see anything that says that. And you're saying, Paul, I knew that wouldn't be back there. Well, that's okay. Now you always will know that if you get a question about metal underground water pipe, later you're going to know exactly what section to go to in the NEC because you'll just get better. I promise you, you'll get better. And if you're a fast track student, I know you've gotten better. So in this case, the metal underground water pipe didn't help us in the index. So the next we would look at and say, okay, well, what about grounding electrodes? Okay, so I'm going to go into the index, and you need to do it too. I encourage people when they're studying with me in these episodes that you have your code book in front of you, and you can pause the video, or you can just do it along with me and see if you beat me to it. All right, so I'm going to go into grounding, see if there's anything under G for grounding electrodes in the index. And so I'm down here in it, and I'm going to look and see if there's anything under grounding electrodes, and you do it too. So let's see here. I have grounding conductors. I have a grounding electrode conductors. I have grounding electrodes, which says to see electrodes. Okay, so we've learned that our electrodes, and some may be specific, have references in here, but we're learning that we needed to, when we're thinking about grounding electrodes, we need to go to where? We need to go to electrodes. So we're going to go to electrodes. That's in E. Now let's go on and go there. Now, granted, if you already have some knowledge of the articles and the sections, I know I serve on Code Panel 5. I know exactly where to go. That doesn't help you if you're new to this and you need to learn the skills of dissecting a question. Remember, when you're starting out, it's not about the time. It's about being able to learn the index, learn what may or may not be in there. We've already learned some key things here. The metal underground water pipe isn't in the back, and then grounding electrodes is not in there. It sends you to electrodes. So we're going to go look under electrodes, see what we see. And I see electrodes. And under electrodes, I notice that it's going to set different ones. And I see metal water piping. All right, and I'm looking under it. Now, this is interesting. Okay, so if you're used to this and you're following along with me, you look in there and you see there's a .30 under metal water piping, and then you see there's also .52. So you'll get better, trust me. You'll learn that the .30s is talking about separately derived systems and things like that, and the .52s or the .52 is under grounding electrodes, right? It just takes you time, but you will, because what you're going to do is you're going to dissect this. Here it says metal water pipe, so you would have gone to 250.30 and looked at it, and you would have said, well, okay, I get it. That's separately derived system. Then you would have gone to 250.52, and you would have gone, hey, that's grounding electrode types, different ones, different list of ones, and A1 happens to be the water pipe type grounding electrode. So that's how you would do it. Now, we don't stop there. Those are just two, and that's how it would have got us there. We look to see if there's anything else that would have helped us in here. Maybe what else might be in the back. So I see it's about the best we can do with that. I got electrodes. I don't see anything else in there that would help us. So I think those are probably the best two we're gonna go to. Okay. So in our case, we would go to the code, and I wanted to show you if you had gone to those two, where you would be. So the .30, let's go to there, just to show you. And once you will forever understand. So we'll go to 250.30. And so if my question in 250.30 had been about separately derived systems, then I now know the difference, right? So 250.30 here, it says separately derived systems, alternating current. So if I'm dealing with separately derived system, transformers, things like that, then I know now when I'm talking about a water pipe ground and I see the .30 in 250, I know that that's separately derived systems. And it could be for transformers and things like that. The key here is now you know. And it makes it easier, and you'll forever remember, okay, I get a question, I'm stressed out, If it's separately derived system, it's talking about a separately derived system, and it's asking me about the grounding system, okay? Then I know for those, I know that it's dot 30. Now let's go on to the dot 52A1, and you'll see the difference. Sorry for my scrolling. If for some reason link is not working with the little drops underneath it, I don't know what's going on with it today, but that's okay. We'll get there. All right, so here is 52. And this is the grounding electrodes. Okay? And here's A1. And that's what it was in your index. A1, 250.52A1. And here's your water pipe. Now, when we say additional triggers, once you get there, bold scanning would be if we had gotten here and we're looking for metal underground water pipe. We would have scanned it, and we would have seen metal underground water pipe. And then the next, we would use the answers, and we know it's got to be an 8, a 6, a 12, or a 10. And really quickly looking through here, we see 10. Okay, so that would tell us trigger 10. So we go back to the question, and we answer 10. And there we go. All right, remember, this technique is, if you want to do time and somebody tells you to do time, that's great. Do that in the last 2-3 weeks before you're ready to take your exam. Until then, relax. Dissect the question. Look up all the possible ways. Beat that question to death. That's the best way to learn. I've been giving this advice for over 30 years. I've helped thousands and thousands of people pass their exams and learn the NEC. This is how you do it. You dissect it. We've learned some critical things about the index while we did that little exercise. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. Okay, so this one, it says, when calculating the demand load for a one-family dwelling, what total minimum volt amperes must be included in the calculation for the required small appliance and laundry circuit loads? Okay, so again, typical question that comes on exams, wanting to make sure that you understand. And by the way, this wouldn't matter if it was a single family dwelling, 2 individual dwellings of a 2-family dwelling, or if it was the individual dwelling units of a multi-family dwelling. Okay, same concept. And it also doesn't matter whether it's an optional or the standard, the same VA values are going to be utilized for both. So this is something you just ingrain in your head, but we're talking about a calculation, right? So where in the code talks about calculations? You got it. Article 220. That's our calculations article. Gives you everything for branch feeders and services that you would need for standard method, optional method, everything in there. Things to commit to memory. Calcs. Now, if your question is about the branch circuits itself for these small appliance and laundry, then that would be 210, right? Because that's branch circuits. They didn't mention anything in here about the branch circuits. So the most important takeaway from me here, right, is that it wanted to calculate the demand load. Okay, there's a load involved in this. So it wants you to know that. So when I see that load and it was no mention about a branch circuit or anything like that, then I know that we're going to be looking at 220. Right? Now, you can go to the index and shuffle around for it. Small appliance, maybe that's the dissect it and use a small appliance branch circuit and look in the back. Maybe you look for laundry circuit in the back. But me, I know that this is in 220. And I also know that it's kind of fairly close to the front of 220, right? So we're going to kind of go look at that. So let's go on and go into 220. So I've got my code book here, and I'll go into it. There's 220, right? So interesting thing about this pictograph here, this infogram here that you see, you'll notice that the general is general provisions. It's in part 1, branch circuit load. So branch circuit load calculations, right here, look right here. And our question is asking about calculate the demand load for a one-family dwelling. So we're not asking about the branch circuit. We're asking about the one-family dwelling, right? So key things to remember here is that unless they state optional, you're going to always use the standard. Of course, in this case, the VA values are not going to matter, but you should always remember that they're going to, they have to give you the information, but it's always considered the standard unless they state otherwise to use an optional method. So standard being the general way to do it in part 3, and then the optional is in part 4. Okay, so let's go on. So at this point, we can go on because we're looking specifically for what? We're looking for small appliance and we're looking for laundry. So we can go to part 3 of this. So I'll go on in and jump us down here and get us to part 3 because we're doing a load calc. If I can, let's see here. Get me back to the beginning of it. Bear with me. Okay, so first of all, let's stop at 2. So here's our branch right there. Okay, and you'll get all the individual things that you need, right? For doing the load calculation and everything right here, right? And office, hotel, dwelling units, you'll get everything here, right? And then you get to part 3. All right, so part 3, you'll see all your general requirements and you'll kind of bold scan. You'll get down and boom, you'll see small appliance and laundry loads for dwelling unit. Okay, that's bold scanning. We went there to the beginning and we knew it was in part 3 because it's a standard method. It's asking for the demand for one family dwelling, but it only wants the values for the small appliance and laundry. Now, some people ask me, well, what about the 3 VA per square foot? That's not what it asked, and it didn't give me the square footage, so there's no way I could ever calculate that. So don't let that creep into your head. That's irrelevant to the way the question. Always answer just the question. That's it. Don't try to put reasoning into it in logic. Just answer the question. So in this case, here we see what it says. It says each dwelling unit, okay, for the small appliance, says each dwelling unit, the load shall be calculated at 1500 VA for each 2-wire small appliance branch circuit covered in 210.11c1. Of course, if you know 210.11c1, that's the one that requires a minimum of 2, right? That's in branch circuit, tells you the number. You got a minimum of 2. Could you have more than 2? Absolutely, but have to have a minimum of 2. And it tells me that they are what? 1500 VA each, right? So we have to have a minimum of 2. So that's 1,500, that's 3,000 right there just for the two 1,500 small appliance branch circuits, okay? And then you go down here, remember it said for laundry. Here's the laundry. The laundry says a load of not less than 1,500 VA shall be included for each 2-wire laundry branch circuit. And remember, if you install more than 2, that's 1,500 each. Same with the small appliance. 2 minimum. If you put 3 in, it's 1,500 times 3. Remember that now. So in this case, it's just the bare minimum. So we had 1,500. Since they're all 1,500, we can just do 1,500 times 3. And that's 4,500. Okay, so let's come back to the question. Here we're at the question. And let's go on and click that. And there you go. That's correct. And there's the math logic right there. 2 small appliances, 1,500 each. That's 3,000. And then you have the one laundry, 1,500. Okay, so 4,500 total, and that was our answer. All that question did, folks, was ask me, what is the demand load that I have to contribute for the small appliance and the laundry loads? Well, we don't have enough information to do anything other than pull the VA value specifically directly from the NEC, and that's it. There's nothing we can apply. We can't apply any real demands. We can't do any of that because we don't have all the variables. All we're doing is answering the question, and that's all you need to do for that. Okay, so that answer there is 4,500. Okay? You're doing great. All right, the next question is, underwater luminaires installed in swimming pools are required to have GFCI protection if they operate at a voltage greater than blank. Okay, so you have greater than the low voltage contact limit, 50 volts, 120 volts, or 15 volts. So the question here is talking about GFCI, right? And it's talking about underwater luminaires, right? Those are triggers. And it's obviously swimming pools. So swimming pools are going to tell me that this is going to be in what article? That's right. It's going to be in 680. But where in 680? Well, obviously, the trigger here is for underwater luminaires that are installed in swimming pools. And then it's dealing with the GFCI protection. So we could use our index, and let's say we can look up what? Remember, we're dissecting. It's not about speed. You might already know the answer to this one, but you need to get used to the index. You need to get familiar with it. So let's say I'm going to use, the first thing I'm going to do is underwater luminaires. So I'm going to go to my index, and I'm going to go and see if there's anything under underwater luminaires. And this is what we mean by dissecting out the question. Okay? If you don't think this works, then you obviously have never taught code or understand the learning train that people have to go through in order to lock something long-term into memory. That's why going to these weekend crash courses just don't work. They work for a brief moment, then you forget everything. You're not banging it into the head. You're not locking it in there so it becomes repetitious. Okay? The ballistic approach to learning the National Electrical Code takes a little time up front, but it pays dividends in the end. So let's see here. So we're looking for underwater luminaires. So I'm going to go down here and look and see if I see anything for underwater luminaires. You may or may not see something. I see underground. I see underground wiring. Okay, so I don't see anything that says underwater luminaires. Okay, now we're not done because we could look up luminaires while we're here instead of going to the obvious swimming pool, but we're just kind of looking. So you're not going to find anything about underwater luminaires. So if you're on an exam and they start asking you questions about underwater luminaires, wet niches, things like that, going to underwater luminaires is not going to help you. So you've learned that. Trust me, it does help reduce the stress in an exam. You kind of know what's there and how to word the questions. So next, let's go look at luminaire just to look and see what we have. So I'm over here and I'm looking at luminaires, and I'm going to go down and see if I see anything that says underwater. So I'm going to look down and I see swimming pools. Okay, that's important. And then I see wet niche, which is the housing frame that's actually underwater for an underwater luminaire. So I see kind of a pattern of where I need to be inside of 680. In fact, swimming pools, spas, and similar installations, you see there's quite a few in here. But they seem to range from .22 up to .26. Anything higher than that's probably going to be for things like spas, hot tubs, and all that kind of other stuff. And right here, we're talking about underwater luminaires. So we're going to kind of stick with this logic we're at. Okay, so I see it now. You also get down, you see wet niche, and you have to know what a wet niche is. You have wet niche, dry niche, and no niche types of luminaires. But you'll notice that the wet niche is also .23. So it's right around that .23 is where we would do our bold scanning type of thing. But we're not done. We're not done. So let's see where else we might look here. Let's see here. Next thing we might bold scan out is swimming pools. So let's go to swimming pools. And again, you might have already gone to 680. You might have already started, and you might have already found the answer. Okay, but we're going to be dissecting it, and you need to do it too. So let's see here. Let's go down, and I'm going to go under swimming pools. All right, here's swimming pools, fountains, and whatnot. And I'm going to go down, and here is luminaires. Right, and it says 680.24. Oh, excuse me, it's under that one. 680.22b, 680.23. Okay, so it's all right there, 22 and 23. Okay, and I'm looking and see if there's, while I'm here, you're looking to see if there's anything else that would be beneficial. And you see a luminaires, it's still .22, still .23. So, we're still in the same ballpark. Okay, all the way at the end, you see underwater luminaires. .23, .26, .33, and .43. Okay, so all you need to remember is when you're in an exam, you get scratch paper. one of the techniques that I use when I was doing exams is that I know that I'm in 680, but all I'll do is I'll write down dot 22, dot 23, just like that. You can't see it, but I'd write that down on my scratch paper so that I remember where I'm at. And so then I'm done at that point. I know that I need to be. So I'm going to go to dot 22 and I'm going to start bold scanning, and I'm going to look for the reference to GFCI. I'm going to look for the reference to the voltage. All that type of stuff are triggers for me. So get your code book, and I'm going to go with us. We're going to go over to the code book, and we're going to go to 680.22. So we're right here. And let's see here, go to 680.22. And scroll down. And be careful when you're going there. You want to be right now. So, okay, so here we go. 680.22. All right. All right, so the question is about GFCIs, very specific. So here I am, and I'm looking, and here it's talking about receptacles. All right. So obviously that GFCI is for receptacles. Here's the luminaires. All right. GFCI protection. Okay. All this right here. Now, again, this is distances and things like that. I'm looking for voltage. Okay. So voltage, listed low voltage are not required grounding, not exceeding low voltage contact limit. Okay. All that type of information. So I'm kind of just looking down. Now, 23. That is underwater luminaires. Very specific to what we were looking for. All right. So now my trigger is the voltage. GFCI protection. Ground fault interrupter protection for personnel shall be installed in the branch circuits applying luminaires operating at voltages greater than the low voltage contact limit. Okay. Now, it also says no luminaires shall be installed for operating on supply circuits over 150 volts between conductors. So which one did our question ask us about? Well, personally, there's no 150 in there, so that doesn't matter. But we know that it says greater than the low voltage contact limit. So that was our answer. And we found that as we dissected the question out. So we'll just click here and get our answer. And there it is right there, 680.23A3. The other neat thing about our Fast Tracks program, and we buy these questions, we don't write these, we buy this package to make them available to you. There's over 800 of them. Plus there's another 500 or so that are in our competency reviews. So those are only available to people that are in our course, that type of thing. So here, that's the answer. And the neat thing here is 2017 and 2020, excuse me, both of those have the same code reference. So there was no change for that one. All right. I think you're doing great. You're learning how to dissect it, breaking it down piece by piece, using the index, and you're learning what is and what is not in the index. And you're getting your money's worth for each question. Okay. All right. Next question. And the last one for this episode, here it says, any one cord and plug connected portable appliance connected to a 120 volt, 20 amp rated branch circuit shall have a maximum rating of blank amperes. So any one cord and plug connected portable appliance, okay, any one, okay, any one cord and plug connected portable appliance connected to a 120 volt, 20 ampere rated branch circuit shall have a maximum rating of blank amps. Where would we find that? Okay, so a couple things that we want to look at here. Again, this is talking about what? A branch circuit. So that's going to send me a trigger that, okay, sounds like a branch circuit, and I'm plugging this cord and plug connected appliance into this branch circuit. Okay, makes sense. And so I need to be looking in branch circuits. Now, how do I dissect this one? Other than to go to what? Article 210, because you've done your flashcards, you've gotten familiar with doing that, you've probably gotten really good at it. But we'll go to the index again and just look, because again, we're going to get our money's worth out of a question. First thing I want to do is I'm going to go look at branch circuits and see what it says. And it might say something like the maximum rating or something like that have triggered that. So let's go look at branch circuits. You'll see that there's almost 2.5 columns of branch circuits. So I'm going to look at it and go down here and just kind of give it a quick skim down. See if there's anything in here that would help us. Okay. Now, you'll notice you see maximum loads, 220.18. Okay, so it's kind of asking us, this is maximum rating. Okay, and the rating is whatever the overcurrent device is rated at. So again, it's talking about, okay, to have a maximum rating cord plug. So, okay, that looks like that is something that's going to be beneficial to me. So I'm going to mark that down. I'm going to finish it out. And you also see something. So that max loads is 220.18. And you also see something called permissible loads, 210.22 and 210.23. So on your paper, you're going to have written that. You're going to write .18, and you're going to do, what is it, .22 and .23, right? You're going to write it down. That way you're in here and you've got it, right? And then you're going to go through with it. Okay, so basically that's it. So what I'm going to do is in the code, I'm going to go over and I'm going to start my journey at .18. Now you might know the answer to this. You select it and you move on, but if you don't, then you need to dissect it. Okay, so we're going to go to the code book. And we'll go back into the code and we'll just go back over here to 210. Like I said, it's not really letting me look at the different things here, so I have to do them manually. There we go. Okay, and let's see here. So I'm going to go to .18 first and read what that says. And remembering we're bold scanning along the way as we get to, when we get to about .18. Okay, branch circuit ratings. Here we go. Okay. All right, so we're looking at here in the question, just so we can kind of regather the question again real quick. It says, any one cord and plug connected portable appliance connected to 120 volt, 20 ampere rated branch circuit shall have a maximum rating of blank amperes. Okay, all right, just so we got it. Maximum rating. All right, so in the 18, it says, branch circuits recognized in the article shall have a rating in accordance with the maximum permitted ampere rating or setting of the overcurrent device. Okay, so the rating of the overcurrent, the rating other than individual shall be 15, 20, 30, 40, and 50, okay, that type of thing. So it looks like we're going to pick 20 because that's the rating of the branch circuit, and cord and plug connected can't exceed that, but we're not stopping there because we saw permissible loads. Okay. So this is talking about the maximum rating, but we're going to finish this out unless you're just ready to click it and move on. But we want to go look real quick, and we're just going to jump to .22. Okay, permissible loads. It says an individual branch circuit. Now, this didn't say anything about an individual branch circuit, by the way, but it said the individual branch circuit shall be permitted to supply any load for which it is rated, but in no case shall the load exceed the branch circuit ampere rating. Okay, sounds good to me so far. Okay, what do you see here? 15 and 20 amp circuit. This was a 20 amp circuit. Remember we said reason for writing these things down? Right here. Cord and plug connected equipment not fastened in place. All right, so this says any one cord and plug portable. Okay, so it's obviously not fastened in place. It says portable. It says the rating of any one cord and plug connected utilization equipment not fastened in place shall not exceed 80% of the branch circuit's rated amperes. Okay, so we were ready to click this 20. But reading that, I'm going to do 20 times 80%, and that is 16. So I'm going to choose 16. Oops, got to bring you back to me so you can see what we're doing here. Okay, so we originally clicked 20 because we're thinking, okay, it says that the branch circuit rating, and that's true, 20 amp, you can put 20 amps on it, but if you have a cord plug connected portable appliance and you're plugging it into 20 amp, we just read what that said, and it basically said in 210.23A1 that for any one that you got to limit it to 80% of that. So that 20 times 80% is actually 16. So let's see if we're right. And there you go. 20 times 80%. Now, why was this trigger this one? Well, because it said cord and plug connected portable. So that tells me it's not fixed in place. That's not to confuse with any branch circuit typically in a house. If it's 15 amps, I can put 15 amps on it. If it's 20 amps, I can put 20 amps on it. But since this is a cord and plug connected portable appliance that's going to be plugged into that, then we have this threshold we have to follow, and it's not to exceed 80%. And that's what we got in 210.23a1. So you kind of got to go through that logic train, and we kind of did that. That's why we had the 18, the 22, and the 23, because we had to make sure that we're already there once. We went in the index. You might as well write them all down in that area that might be beneficial to you. And then you want to remember how important it is to bold scan. We want to use what's in the question to help us get where we need to get. Okay. Hopefully that's helped you out, made it a little easier for you. Look, exams are not easy. They're not designed to be easy. They're the gateway, right? They're the gateway to get you past from one level to the next. And we want to help you do that. If you find that you struggle with questions, you struggle with understanding and dissecting, and you need that little extra effort, then think about our Fast Tracks program. And I can tell you right now, there is no better program on the market. For the money, you get access to me on Wednesday nights. You get all these questions. You get the access to the Sparky Hub to post your questions. You got the Wednesday night where you can come and join us and ask your questions. I'm always there to help you anytime you might have any trouble in the program. And I can tell you, we put a lot into this program. Every competency review you do, and these aren't the competency reviews aren't these. They're not multiple choice. You have to actually fill them out. It's a struggle, but it's supposed to be that way. It's going to make you better. We cover calculations, the general information. We cover 1 and 2 family, multifamily, other than dwellings. We really get into the weeds, and it's tough. But people come out of that successful. So hopefully you'll check it out. Again, the address is right there. fasttracksystem.com. We have a demo. Watch our demo, and you can see what's in the program and see if it's beneficial to you. I'm always here to answer any questions. Just go to our website, fasttracksystem.com. More than happy to answer those questions for you. All right, folks. Hopefully you got something out of a quick lesson today. Dissect the questions. Take the time. Don't let anybody tell you you have to rush through them. They're your questions. Take your time. There will always be time for you to speed test yourself, but that's usually the last 2 or 3 weeks before your exam, just to build that confidence in your speed. Till then, learn how to be able to look at a question and dissect it, identify it. That's going to help you become a better test taker. And in the end, you'll retain it better and you'll become a better electrician. All right, folks, stay safe and God bless. Hey, what up, everybody? Welcome to another episode here at Electrical Code Academy. My name is Paul Abernathy, and I'm your host as always. On today's episode, I've been getting a lot of questions about our grounding and bonding course. A little bit more detail about it people are wanting to ask. And everybody knows that I serve on Code Making Panel 5, and it's my most favorite code panel to serve on. I'm also on 17, but something about grounding and bonding just, it's always been my favorite topic. And so it's been a blessing for me to be on that code panel with such amazing people on that panel. Some of the most talented people I've ever met serve on Code Making Panel 5. So it's always a joy to be in the room and be in the mix and have those discussions. And it's just a pure pleasure to do that. And so people ask me about our grounding and bonding course and how detailed does it get? And so it doesn't matter whether you're been an electrician for 30 years or 5 years or 2 years. Everybody needs to know about grounding and bonding. Some of the biggest mistakes that I see over on TradeHounds, TikTok, all those social media where people post their pictures, I routinely see so many violations. I see electricians, I see electrical inspectors calling out things that they probably aren't aware that they're calling out things that are wrong, or that they're saying that this is code, that is code, when it's not really code. And or it's compliant and they say it's not compliant, and it gets confusing for people. And of course, when that gets out on social media, it propagates that, and that's where people start to apply grounding and bonding improperly. So I'm really proud of our course. Now it's available in the 2017 edition or the 2020 edition. So we're excited about that. The 2023 edition of this comes out in about 2 months or so, depending on when you're listening to this video. It may or may not be out, but it's not out as of the recording of this video. But it will be based on the 2023 edition. But we have the 2020 and we have the 2017 available on our website. All you got to do is go to this URL right here, fasttracksystem.com, and up in the courses, you'll see a link to the grounding and bonding course, which we refer to as the Fast Tracks Purple course. Now, the color coding is so that it's easier for us to manage all the courses that we have, because we have HVAC electricians, everything you need to know about that, service calls and troubleshooting. We have industrial, residential, commercial. We have electrical theory. And so we give them color systems. So it's just an easy way for us to manage the different types of systems. So anyway, let's go on and look and see a little bit about what's involved in the grounding and bonding course. And let's go check it out. Okay, when you get into your console, this is essentially what it's going to look like to you, okay? A couple buttons won't be there because they're obviously for me when I create the course and add a bunch of extra content and stuff. But at the end of the day, you won't see these green buttons, but you'll see this editing and all this stuff, because we create the course, we edit the course, we add stuff in it, we move things around. So again, your version won't look exactly like this, but essentially it's the same set of units. And just on the left side, you'll have all your console information for your courses. And then this will be your main working screen. Now, along the right down here, you have a lot of features. You won't use the majority of these. You might use the the flashcards. You'll go down here to see what your grades are if you have any grading. You'll have a study hub where you can do bookmarks and highlights and all that stuff. And you got the actual course book that you can click right here, and it will open it up. And of course, you can print any page off of this that you want. Okay, you want to print it off of it. So you want to print anything that you want out of here at all, that's all you got to do. I just kind of move you through, and here you can see all the information is available here. Acknowledgements, and of course you just scroll down, and there, of course, there you see my name right here, because I had a hand in this publication. But at the end of the day, it is a great course, and we have tweaked this thing. So anyway, the first thing you'll come in to do is you'll come in here and you'll start in your units, Introduction to Grounding and Bonding. There's a video here. Now, this video, all of these are produced by me, but it kind of gives you an overview of what to expect. So I just kind of click on this to kind of give you an idea. It gives you an overview of what to expect. Welcome to Introduction to Grounding and Bonding. In this introductory unit, we're going to talk about. So it's basically an introduction. So you kind of have an idea of what you're going to encounter. And so that's included in the course. So that's always important to watch it so you know what you're going to get during that episode. But you've got your reading material. You've got some quizzes here. They all count towards your grading. But again, the reading material just kind of give you a look-see. You go into the reading material. You can start right at the beginning. And as you can see, it's kind of a flip format. You see what your objectives are, you scroll through, you have a lot of information. We start with the mystery, kind of explaining grounding and bonding and some of the nuances to be aware of. But I want you to know that at any time, you can make this text a little bit bigger, depending on the device that you're working on. You can actually bookmark any page. So you see me click that little red bookmark there. So let's say I wanted to come back to this later. I'm logged out and I want to come back later. Hey man, go down here to the study hub. Click on it, go to your bookmarks right here. And there was the introduction that we were at, right? And the latest one that we got was the mystery right here. Now I've got a bunch of bookmarks in here, but you just go to the mystery and you'll see that it'll come up on the left side. And then you want to get rid of it, you just move your bookmark and you keep going forward. A lot of reading material. And let's say you're tired and you want to relax and you want it to read it to you, right? Then we have what's called the README feature right here, which all you have to do is you can click this and it'll read the entire thing, or you can left click, drag over it, right? And then this will pop up. And when this pops up, this allows you to highlight some text, and that text that you highlight will get put over here in the study hub. Maybe it's questions you have you want to send us to clarify. Well, go on and highlight it, and then when you get ready to do your email to us, then all you got to do is go in there and get it and send it in the email. Here's the read text feature, and watch this.
Article 250 of the National Electrical Code registered trademark NEC registered trademark.
Now you get to change the voices.
Contains the general requirements.
Okay, so you can have a male voice, female voice, Australian voice, whatever. You change those voices down here. You just click on read speak, and here you see medium, slow, very fast, male, female, US or Australian. And again, it's just a good way if you're tired, you can have it dictated to you, and that's just a cool feature. But as you can see, you go through here, there'll be certain things that are highlighted that tells you it comes extracted straight from the NEC. You'll get a bunch of definitions that you need to start learning, and you'll see that they will have the code reference with the asterisk right beside it, okay, for relevance. And so as you kind of read through this, you'll get a lot of really amazing illustrations, and sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? So this, for example, is showing a transfer switch. So again, when you look at all these things, and of course this one right here would be separately derived, right? Because it does switch to neutral. You'll learn all that in this course, okay? So you'll see that it'll go into the ground fault path, and it's just a lot of reading that you've got to do. So you can do it on a tablet, you can do it on a desktop, you can do it on your phone. You can access the courses from any platform you want. It's perfectly fine. But you'll see that it gets into Ohm's law. We'll talk about the basic principles of Ohm's law because you need to understand that for grounding and bonding in order to be able to put the pieces together, okay? So anyway, there's just a lot of stuff in here that you can go over. We cover, there's your intro video, the general, the reading. Again, go to the very front introduction, learn what the objectives are, and you'll see the introduction, and we start talking about it. And here's what's unique about our course. It's not like the SOARS thing where it jumps all around. We take you to the beginning of 250.1, and we work your way up. So you'll study the scope, and then you'll work your way up through all the important sections within Article 250. It's important that we do it that way. So our grounding and bonding course is like no other course on the market. We get into the grounding aspects, electrodes, there's illustrations that try to hammer these things really home. There you go, an example of all the electrodes, again, all being tied together. We go into this stuff in detail. And of course, if you have any questions, guess what? That's what I'm here for. You reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to answer any of those questions. So we go over the grounding, enclosures, bonding, and there's a lot of great additional articles in here. For example, if you ever wanted to know the story about Herb Ufer, that's in here. So it's some great extra content here. How to do a ground resistance test and using a 3-point, 4-point fall of potential. All of that stuff is kind of in here. But we also are going to give you, when you get this grounding and bonding course, we are going to give you all of the practice exams as well. There's no way we're not going to give you this little extra here to test your knowledge. Again, hone your skills. So that's included as an extra bonus. But there's so much in this program. We go over the details of the grounding electrode system. Here you go, grounding electrode system. You see I've got some highlights here. You can always undo these highlights. Look, I removed the highlight, but you just left click, drag it over it, and it'll pop up and you can highlight it. We'll do it that color. And what it does is when you highlight it, if you go to the study hub, it actually puts your highlights in here, right? So here's where we were at, and here's where we highlighted, right? And if I click it, see 250.50 up here, 250.50 down here. If I click on it, you can see exactly what you highlighted. Now, if you want to go right to the page, you click the arrow, but you could left click that, then right click and copy it. And you could copy it to an email if you have a question about grounding and bonding. I love questions on grounding and bonding. Okay. So anyway, there's just so much in here. You got these illustrations and other clarifications, and everything has really been done top notch when it comes to the illustrations. And I want to really make it clear to folks that in this grounding and bonding course, You can print out any page you want, just right here at the top. You see right here is a print button. You just click that print button, and what it'll do is it'll put one over here with an easy print button right here, and you print it out, and it'll print everything out. Okay, everything, even the illustration. So if there's a certain grounding or certain bonding thing that you really love that image, you want to take it with you, put it in your code book, show it to an inspector, just print it out. You got access, full rights to all of it. Again, the other beautiful thing is with this, and like all of our programs, they're browser adaptable. So it adapts for reading purposes. It will adapt to a tablet, desktop, even a phone. And you can still read the material, change the size of the text, do everything that you could. As long as it's a browser, you can do anything you want. And that's the beautiful thing. And if you have our app that you get from our website, then you can also access all of your courses through the app as well. So that is a cool feature to have. So you'll see here, I've got different things on. There's different illustrations and call outs. And I will tell you, it is a good read, right? The way that it's written and structured, it gives you all the code references, talks about the ground rods. You've heard us talk about it. It's got to be below a permanent moisture level. Well, we're practical to do so. All of that stuff is in here. All the changes that might have taken place from 2017 to 2020 when it comes to grounding and bonding are covered in here, full detail. When you see highlights like this tells you this is all extracted 100% from the National Electrical Code. There's that little asterisk down here to let you know that. And another neat thing is what we do in this that makes it different than some other programs when it comes to grounding and bonding is this thing right here. It's called discussion. So in our program, we'll explain something and then we'll go into a discussion. And the discussion will give you extra insight, little tips and tidbits that you can take with you for grounding and bonding and things like that. So let's remove that. And you see some illustrations again. There's just loads and loads of good illustrations in this program. Now, as far as the features concerned over here, you also have what's called a glossary. And this is just a glossary of terms so that you can just kind of go through and read these glossary of terms. You can also create flashcards to test your knowledge, okay? So there's no flashcards for that chapter, but let's go and look at key terms. So accessible, okay? And it capable of being reached for operation, renewal, and inspection, right? Next card. Adjustment of ampacity. Reduction of ampacity to account for more than 3 current carrying conductors. Again, that's in 310.15c1. And so you learn all these things. And you know what? You can make any number of flashcards you want. Unlimited numbers. So maybe you're trying to still get better at learning the code. Well, you can create flashcards for every article, every important section, every important table, and test your skills over and over again rather than using physical flashcards. Do them electronically, and they'll work on a phone or your tablet, and you can do them anywhere to kind of hone those skills. Right? So grounding and bonding is a fundamental course. Other than exam prep and learning the National Electrical Code on a bigger level, the grounding and bonding is brilliant because everybody needs to have a deeper understanding of objectionable currents and understanding of bonding things together in raceways and what happens if we put a grounding electrode conductor inside of a ferrous raceway and the requirements to bond it at each end. Well, one end would bond right to the GEC, but the other end, when it's connected to the cabinet, which is ultimately connected to the same terminal bus that grounding electrode conductor is going to connect to, then you'll learn that takes care of that end. And the connection to the GEC down at the end where the electrode is gets done by a specific clamp. You'll learn all that stuff in our program. You'll learn what it means to have an improper case to neutral. So you have a violation of 250.24 where downstream you got your neutrals and your equipment ground coming together. That's a bad thing. You'll learn about all this in here, and then when you're done, you will be somebody who can correct other people's issues on grounding and bonding. You'll be better at grounding and bonding, and of our courses, this is probably the second most popular behind our Fast Tracks exam prep stuff. So if you did the exam prep, the logical step would be moving into grounding and bonding, right? And so it's just, they go hand in hand. So that's it, folks. I hopefully you enjoyed that. Just kind of give you a quick overview of the grounding and bonding. I want to take all your time up, but again, grounding and bonding is fundamental. And if you go around social media, you will see it done improperly everywhere. And that's a bad thing. You need to make sure ground. See, the circuits stay working until something goes wrong. Well, when it goes wrong, a lot of times it's improper grounding and bonding. And it's just sat there waiting to become a dangerous situation. Well, if you learn the fundamentals of grounding and bonding, you don't have to worry about that. And you'll be able to spot errors really quickly in a lot of installations. So hopefully you got something out of that, folks. Till next time, stay safe. God bless. Take care.